Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Laura Conley. Laura Conley was born on March 15, 1978, in the United States as the third child of Carleen and James Conley. She grew up happily with her sisters, enjoying a loving and caring family environment. However, everything changed when Carleen and James divorced. At that time, Laura was a teenager and deeply affected by her parents' separation. Struggling with her emotions, she turned to alcohol for comfort, which eventually led to an addiction to psychotropic substances. Her mother believes Laura's addiction stems from the failure of their marriage. Carleen was born on June 13, 1945, in Virginia. Her 3 daughters were her top priority. Carleen blamed herself for the impact the divorce had on her youngest daughter, Laura. Carleen was always understanding and helpful to Laura, especially during difficult times. Family members and close friends often noted Laura's irritable behavior. While Carleen's other daughters married and became independent, Laura continued to live in the family home in Kentucky. She was unemployed and required constant care. Laura believed she was mentally ill and frequently sought medical help for her medications. However, there came a point when her healthcare providers stopped prescribing her these medications. Desperate to get her medications, Laura began breaking into neighbors' homes to steal any pills she could find. Laura often took advantage of her mother's kindness, constantly calling her at work and causing disruptions that forced Carleen to quit her job. In 2008, Laura was convicted of petty theft, but she was quickly released because her mother posted bail. Unfortunately, the situation got worse. Laura not only verbally abused her mother, but also physically abused her. Although Laura physically harmed Carleen on several occasions, Carleen still did not report her daughter or ask her to leave the house. When an incident occurred, Laura needed a mental health evaluation, but Carleen still welcomed her daughter back home, feeling obligated to take care of Laura. It is common for parents who have experienced violence from their children to hesitate in reporting the incidents. They often fear that doing so may harm their relationship with their child. However, this reluctance can endanger their own safety. Laura's violent behavior was not only directed at her mother, it also extended to her boyfriend, Chris Lewin. Laura faced legal consequences for her actions against him on 2 separate occasions. One notable incident occurred in late October 2014. Laura woke Chris while he was asleep and accused him of cheating, leading to an argument that turned physical. During the confrontation, Laura not only bit Chris but also used a kitchen knife to lightly cut his hand. As a result of the incident, Laura was given a light sentence in order to attend anger management therapy. However, court records indicate that there is no evidence that she continued to participate in the program. At age 35, Laura continued her behavior. On January 7, 2015, she was arrested again for biting her boyfriend's finger when he intervened to stop her from attacking Carleen. He could not understand why Laura was so deeply hostile towards her mother. Carleen had always been a caring, devoted mother to her 3 daughters and proud of her 5 grandchildren. She worked hard to support Laura and give her the help she needed to overcome her difficulties. Unfortunately, despite Carleen's unconditional love and good intentions, Laura began to abuse her mother over time. 5. Laura called 911 to report an incident at her home. She informed police that a home invasion had occurred, resulting in her mother being shot to death. Officers from the Independence, Taylor Mill, and Covington police departments quickly arrived at the scene. They witnessed a horrific scene, Laura covered in blood, and her mother, 69-year-old Carleen Conley, lying on the kitchen counter with multiple stab wounds and in critical condition. When police asked Laura what had happened, she claimed she did not remember because she had been unconscious. She mentioned that about 2 hours before the incident, several people had knocked on her door asking for candy, which was common on Halloween, even though the holiday was still far away. She provided police with a description of the suspect, which led to a search of the area. However, police were unable to find anyone matching Lara's description. To continue the investigation, police took Lara to the police station for questioning. After arriving at the police station, Lara provided additional details. She mentioned that she was being pursued for money owed to drug dealers. Additionally, Lara gave police inconsistent accounts of how she found her mother's body. Initially, she said that she found Carlene dead when she returned home. However, in the same conversation, she later said that after waking up in the basement, she went upstairs and found her mother dead on the kitchen floor. However, police Mike Richman and Jim Moore quickly connected Lara to the crime within hours of starting their investigation. It became clear that she had lied to the police about what happened. The evidence showed that there had been no break-in, no fingerprints were found on the doors or windows to suggest that anyone else had been there. This led to the conclusion that Lara was the only person in the house when Carlene was murdered. Therefore, in the early morning of Sunday, March 15th, while Lara was celebrating her 37th birthday, the police arrested her for Carlene's murder. The next day, Monday, March 16th, Lara appeared before the judge via video link and stated that she pleaded not guilty. Police later booked her into the county jail without bail on charges of murder and domestic violence. She was also ordered not to contact her boyfriend. Prosecutor Rob Sanders said Carlene's murder would have a significant impact on the community, which is typically quiet and has a low crime rate. The medical examiner's report found that the attack on Carlene was severe, with an autopsy showing she had been stabbed 77 times, with 27 stab wounds and 2 bite wounds. On March 24th, Lara appeared in court and told the judge that she had no money, assets, or property, so she could not afford an attorney. The judge appointed a public defender for her and the hearing began. During the court proceedings, Officer Michael confirmed that Lara had opened the door to the police and that she was the only person in the house other than Carlene. He described finding Carlene on the kitchen floor, surrounded by several knives. He also noted that Lara was covered in blood, with her shirt, arms, legs, face, lips, and nose all covered in blood. After hearing the police testimony, the judge sent the case to the jury, who convicted Lara Conley of murder on April 16, 2015. Lara's trial began on January 3, 2017, nearly a year and 9 months after the crime. The jury heard testimony from about 30 witnesses. The prosecution presented evidence from police officers involved in the investigation and from Carlene's family. In contrast, the defense argued that Lara acted in self-defense due to severe emotional distress. The defense claimed that the knife attack was in response to an attack by her mother. When Lara took the stand, she explained to the jury that she and her mother had argued about her birthday celebration. During the argument, her mother hit her on the head with a heavy object. Lara testified that she could not remember anything that happened after that, including how she got injured or her 911 call. The jury learned that a physical examination of Lara after the crime revealed she had cuts on her head and back, bruises on her body, and a hematoma under her eye. On March 23, 2017, the parties presented their closing arguments. Assistant District Attorney Lawrence summarized the evidence and highlighted the many conflicting and unconfirmed accounts that Lara presented. Later that day, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Lara Conley guilty of first-degree murder and recommended a 27-year prison sentence. Lara's legal team filed for a retrial, claiming that her sentence was unfair. The lawyers argued that Lara was dealing with mental health issues, including bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. In their appeal, the defense emphasized that Lara had consumed large amounts of alcohol and a drug intended to cause drowsiness shortly before the incident. However, the judge rejected the appeal and ordered a psychological evaluation by court-appointed experts. The defense argued for the cancellation of the preliminary trial and requested a new trial, claiming that the initial trial was flawed, leading to Lara's guilty verdict. The prosecutor was allowed to use evidence from a prior assault committed by Lara. In June 2019, the Kent Supreme Court ruled that the trial court had made a mistake, which led to the overturning of Lara's 27-year prison sentence for her mother's murder and ordered a new trial. However, instead of going through a retrial, Lara opted to accept a plea agreement, which reduced her sentence to 20 years. As a result, she will be eligible for parole in 2032. Currently, Lara is incarcerated at the Women's Correctional Facility in Kent, where she is serving her sentence. Lara killed her own mother and displayed no remorse, leaving unresolved questions about her motives. Additionally, in just 10 years, Lara could be released. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Shanynthia Gardner. Shanynthia Gardner was born in the late 80s in Memphis, Tennessee, USA. Not much is known about her childhood except that she was the daughter of Eleanor Snodgrass, who lived in a cozy wooden house in Madison, Alabama. Shanintia's childhood and youth passed as normal as any other girl of her time. Shanynthia was a young girl with curly brown hair, slim and beautiful. She was always surrounded by loyal friends and showed outstanding talent. Shanynthia was full of creative spirit, had a unique talent for songwriting and a passion for music. She expressed herself through singing and attracted the attention of the local people. In addition to singing, Shanynthia was fascinated by the world of fashion and photography. She had the ability to turn everyday moments into works of art in front of the camera. Despite her diverse interests, Shanynthia was a charitable woman who attended church regularly and took good care of her family. Everything in Shaninthia's life seemed to be preordained and promised a bright future. Shanynthia was 14 when she met Daryl Clayton through mutual friends. They quickly became friends and their relationship became more serious after graduating from high school, becoming an official couple. They spent a lot of time together and were considered serious and stable young people. However, their crime records had some questionable details. Both had minor crimes such as traffic violations and disorderly conduct on the street. In 2008, Daryl was charged with assaulting a woman, even though the act was unintentional. He faced severe punishment, but all charges were later dropped. Shanynthia and Daryl were not officially married but lived together. In 2008, they had a son named Dee. Shanynthia became a caring mother, taking care of not only her son but also Daryl's 2 children from a previous relationship. Daryl's mother, Sonia Clayton, considered Shanynthia a family member, not just her son's lover. However, their relationship did not last. Although the reason is unknown, they kept in touch after the breakup. For Daryl, Shanynthia was still a good wife and a caring mother. When her son Dee was only 2 years old, Shanynthia was involved in a small incident, possibly a parking ticket or a small argument. This was insignificant compared to what would happen in her future. Marrying Martin Gardner opened a new chapter in Shaninthia's life. This union brought joy and stability to her life. Shanynthia won Martin over with her kindness and love for her children, which was reflected in her gentleness and intelligence. Their love story developed rapidly. In September 2013, they decided to live together and moved into an apartment complex in southeast Shelby County. The wedding marked the beginning of a new phase in their lives. After the celebration, they had their first son, Telone, followed by baby Saya in 2014. Soon after, their 2 daughters Savi and Yazzie were born, bringing happiness to their family. In total, Martin and Shanynthia have 4 children together and 1 child from Shaninthia's previous relationship. As a young mother, her children have always been her #1 priority. She enjoys working part-time at Children's Hospital and is actively involved in a fundraising organization to help children. It is her passion and purpose in life. on a normal Friday, July 1, 2016. Around noon, Shanynthia called her husband, Martin. Her voice was completely calm. She told him that she was going to take the children to the movies. There was no indication that something terrible was going to happen that day. At that moment, they was having a quiet conversation when a sudden and confusing event occurred. Shanynthia suddenly changed her attitude and took a kitchen knife into the living room. She attacked her 6-month-old daughter, Yazzie, leaving her defenseless and in a terrible situation. Yazzie's life was cut short abruptly by the person she loved and was closest to. Dee, the eldest child, was only 7 years old and witnessed this horrific scene. He was too young to understand what was happening, but he knew that he needed to act to save his younger brother and sister. Panicked and desperate, Dee ran out of the house. Shanynthia continued to hold the knife and chase her son. She rushed after Dee, but he screamed loudly, attracting the attention of the neighbors. Several neighbors heard his screams and rushed outside to see what was happening. They witnessed a horrifying scene that they could not forget in their minds. When they realized that Dee was being chased, but Shanynthia stopped. However, the horror was not over yet. Shanynthia returned to the house, where Savi and Talon were waiting for her. Distraught, she went upstairs to the bedroom where the children were lying. Those were the last moments of their innocent lives. Meanwhile, those who witnessed the horrifying scene quickly called the emergency services, asking for help and rescuing Dee and his siblings. None of them could have imagined the tragic consequences that awaited this peaceful street. The sheriff arrived at the scene and witnessed a strange scene inside the house at 7449 Southern Hill Road. They found Shanynthia covered in blood and her 4 children lying motionless, lifeless. The scene left everyone in shock. Shanynthia sat there, holding her cell phone and slowly dialing her husband, Martin. Her voice was soft but cold as she confessed to killing her children. The tragedy that had happened in their lives was a horrific event that would forever be remembered in this quiet neighborhood. By the time the prosecutor's office and the special forces arrived at the scene, everything was over. There was only an eerie silence in the house that had once been home to the Happy Gardner family. Blood and horror were everywhere. Investigators found a bloody knife and witnessed the horrific incident. Chaplains came to help and were shocked by what had happened. Professionals were also ready to assist Dee, who was suffering from a horror that required immediate intervention. Shanynthia was arrested and held without bail. Her trial is scheduled for July 5th. The horrific events unfolding in Shanynthia Gardner's life have left society unable to remain indifferent. Although she has been portrayed as a monster, Shanynthia is still a mother and partner who radiates love, care, and joy. Her co-worker, Michelle Jaiman, has defended Shanynthia on social media and spoken out about the injustice of the charges. Michelle also emphasized the importance of considering postpartum depression in cases like this. Dr. Joel Rissman, a psychiatrist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, confirmed that infanticide by mothers is rare and often accompanied by mental illness. He also pointed to the lack of mental health funding in the state, which leaves many families without the support they need. Dr. Diane Barnes, an expert in postpartum psychology and health, explained the difference between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. She emphasized that the two conditions are completely different, with different symptoms. In Shaninthia's case, Dr. Diane doubts that women with postpartum depression would commit such acts. Instead, she favors the possibility that Shanynthia suffered from psychosis. The investigation into Shanynthia Gardner's case has been fraught with difficulties. Her defense attorney, Craig Morton, has chosen not to comment on the case to the media in its early stages, saying it is too early to discuss it. On July 5, 2016, Shanynthia did not speak at her trial, appearing only via video. Judge Lambert questioned her, but Shanynthia did not respond. After the trial, she was taken to the Institute of Mental Health. Shaninthia's family members were present in court but declined to comment to reporters. Morton's attorney and prosecutor, Jennifer Nichols, plans to file a motion to preserve evidence in the case, including information gathered from social media. In January 2017, Shaninthia was formally charged with 4 counts: aggravated child abuse, aggravated murder with a weapon, aggravated child abuse, and child neglect. The mysterious and chilling investigation continues, leaving the community waiting for justice and answers to many unanswered questions. The hearing was attended by Shaninthia's family members on the day of the tragedy. Sonia, Drill's mother, must have been devastated when she heard the news of the horrific tragedy. She rushed to the scene in a search for her nephew D. Sonia asserted that this action was completely unlike the Shaninthia she knew. Initially, she believed that something supernatural or demonic had caused the tragedy. However, as time passed and the initial shock subsided, Sonia began to consider possible reasons. She theorized that the couple may have been in the process of divorce. Shaninthia, fearful of raising 5 children on her own, may have made the terrifying decision to end it all. However, despite these speculations, Sonia found it hard to believe. To her, the Shaninthia she knew was not the person capable of such a terrible act. Dee's father did not believe Shaninthia was guilty. Although he was not the official guardian, he visited his son regularly after his separation from Shaninthia. However, the last time he saw his son was in November 2014. He noticed that Shaninthia was becoming more extreme in her actions and decisions. All attempts to contact her son failed and he was banned from interfering in her life. Shaninthia's friends and family soon noticed a sudden change in her. She began to show unusual symptoms, from feeling irritable to deep anxiety, paranoia, and panic attacks. Her behavior became erratic and unpredictable, leading many to suspect that she was suffering from postpartum depression. The sudden change in Shaninthia's behavior shocked those around her. She had been a strong, dependable woman who had everything under control. But now, she seemed to have lost her temper, leaving many wondering what had happened. The first signs of trouble appeared in March 2015. Friends and family were puzzled. One day, Shaninthia left work early, picked up her 5 children, and drove off in an unknown direction. Her husband, Martin, thought his wife was just taking the children for a walk and relaxing in the park, as was her usual routine. However, after several hours, Martin was confused and decided to call the police. Shaninthia drove from Memphis to Corinth, 74 miles east, with her 5 children. She did not know anyone there and had no apparent reason for being there. She was later found in the emergency room at St. Francis Hospital, but police did not disclose any details. She had superficial cuts on her neck and wrists, possibly from a suicide attempt, but her children were too young to understand what was happening. After being brought home, Shaninthia began to act strangely. She told her husband Martin that someone had threatened their family, but did not provide any further information. This shocked Martin, who had never had any previous threats. When she was with family and friends, Shaninthia complained about her job and felt bad about it. She then began to say that some of her co-workers wanted to hurt her. Despite the unusual signs, Shaninthia did not exhibit abusive or violent behavior toward her children or others. The wait for trial was long and difficult, with significant delays due to multiple psychiatric evaluations of the defendant. In 2021, the final non-jury trial took place. The defense focused on Shaninthia's mental illness argument. The prosecutor acknowledged her mental condition, but argued that the defendant still had the ability to distinguish right from wrong and was aware of the illegality of her actions. Ultimately, Shelby County Criminal Court Judge James rejected the defense. In December 2021, Shaninthia Gardner was found guilty on all charges against her. In February 2022, Shaninthia, 34, appeared in court to receive her sentence, with her husband Martin present. Judge James sentenced her to life in prison for each count of murder and 15 years for each count of child abuse and neglect. Shanynthia will only be eligible for parole after serving 51 years, including the 5 years she has already served before sentencing. She will be eligible for parole at age 80, about 46 years from now. After the hearing, the prosecutor expressed approval of the sentence, saying it satisfied Martin's desire for justice for his children. Martin also felt relieved to know that Shanynthia would no longer have the opportunity to harm any more children. An evening vigil was held at Sonia family's apartment complex to remember the victims. Sonia stood among a crowd of neighbors, relatives, and police. Attendees held red and white candles, praying for the soul of the deceased. The Baptist minister said this was the first step in healing the community, and everyone could only support the surviving child and his father through this difficult time. Martin did not attend the memorial service because he was too sad. Sonia spoke to the press on his behalf. The leadership of the Children's Hospital where Shanynthia worked also sent condolences. Martin's colleagues set up a social media page to help him arrange the funeral for his 4 children. During the service, Martin spoke about his family and children in an emotional and noble way. His words showed admirable resilience. At the end of his speech, Martin emphasized that he would always remember the happy image of his family, with Shanynthia and the children by his side. This is a precious memory that he will cherish forever. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michaela Garrecht. Sharon Murch and her husband, Rod Garrecht, had been trying to have a child for 5 years. After numerous visits to doctors and fertility treatments, they were overjoyed when their daughter Michaela Garrecht was born on January 24, 1979, in Oakland, California. Her parents affectionately referred to her as their miracle child due to the difficulties they faced in conceiving her. After that, their family soon welcomed 2 new members, a daughter named Libby and a son named Alex. In 1986, the family relocated to Hayward, where they settled down, established their home, and raised their children. As a child, Michaela was known for being intelligent, lively, and well-behaved. She listened attentively to her parents and followed their advice closely. Sharon was a caring and attentive mother. Sometimes it makes others feel like she's being overprotective of her children. Given the rise in child abductions in California during the 1980s, her caution was understandable. As a result, she always kept her children close to home and ensured they were never far from adult supervision. On Saturday, November 19, 1988, Michaela finished breakfast with her family. Her best friend, 9-year-old Katrina Rodriguez, stopped by to ask if Michaela could accompany her to the local grocery store to buy snacks. Initially, Sharon, Michaela's mother, refused permission. However, Michaela persisted, assuring her mother that they would be safe and return quickly. Eventually, Sharon relented and gave her permission to go with you. As a precaution, Sharon reminded they to be careful. She gave Michaela $5, then the girls eagerly grabbed their scooters and left. Before leaving, Michaela expressed her love for her mother. As Sharon watched them leave, her husband Rod decided to go outside and work on the car. Meanwhile, Sharon headed back inside to clean up the breakfast dishes. Unbeknownst to her, the next few minutes would alter her life forever. Michaela and Katrina eagerly rode their scooters to the Rainbow Market on Mission Boulevard and parked them right outside the store. The girls then entered the market to buy some snacks. They purchased 2 Mountain Dew sodas, 2 beef jerky sticks, and 2 cherry toffees before exiting the store. Engrossed in a conversation about their holiday plans, they completely forgot about their scooters. As they were about to leave the parking lot, they suddenly remembered their scooters were still outside. To their surprise, the scooters was missing. The girls decided to split up and search for it. Michaela spotted the scooter first. It had been moved about 3 parking spaces away and was now standing beside a car. Without hesitation, Michaela rushed over to the scooter and bent down to grab the handlebars. In a rapid and unexpected turn of events, a man leapt from the car and grabbed Michaela around her waist. He then forcefully pushed her into the back seat. Witnessing the shocking scene unfold, Katrina momentarily froze, her eyes fixed on the chaotic scene as her friend struggled to break free from the abductor's grasp. The car sped away from the parking space, accelerating down Mission Boulevard toward Union City. Regaining her composure, Katrina rushed back into the store and alerted the cashier, Rona Ranilan, about the kidnapping. Rona quickly called the local police, and they were quickly present at the crime scene. Additionally, Rona also contacted Katrina's father and told them what had just happened to their daughter. Sharon was doing the dishes at home when she heard a frantic shout from outside. Her husband, Rod, burst through the front door, telling her that Michaela had just been kidnapped outside the Rainbow Market. Along with Katrina's father, they rushed to the store and found police everywhere, questioning customers and staff. Katrina was extremely upset and was allowed to go home with her father. Rod and Sharon stayed behind, hoping to get some information about what had happened. However, as Sharon waited anxiously, she couldn't shake off a growing sense of fear. Sharon recalled a poem written by Michaela. She also remembered an incident from the week before that had left her unsettled. Specifically, Sharon had woken up early one morning to find Michaela sitting at the breakfast table, writing in the early hours. Michaela's mother asked her what she was working on, and Michaela vaguely replied that she was writing a poem. Sharon asking repeatedly what the poem was about. Michaela finally explained that her poem was inspired by the noises she had heard coming from the attic that morning. She had been thinking about people who were kidnapped and being held captive, and her poem was about their experiences. She explained that the poem actually referred to individuals who were being detained against their will, rather than those who had been kidnapped and murdered. Sharon found Michaela's poem to be disturbing and out of character, as her daughter was typically a happy person. In hindsight, Sharon believes that Michaela may have written the poem as a kind of prophecy or premonition. The police were provided with a description of the man who allegedly kidnapped Michaela. Rona, a cashier, told them that the suspect was a white male in his 30s with a mustache. She also reported that he drove a car that was either burgundy or maroon in color, but was unable to provide details about the make or model. According to Rona, the man had parked his car and gotten out, but instead of entering the store, he looked through the window, observing the girls and other customers without entering. She suspected he might be planning to rob the store. A sketch artist created a composite picture, then distributed to local police stations and news outlets. The investigators found the scooter used in the abduction and collected it as evidence. They obtained a handprint from the scooter handle, which was added to their database to identify the kidnapper. But it did not lead to any leads. The day after the kidnapping, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the investigation, they suspecting a relevance between a series of local child kidnappings, but this was ultimately not confirmed. Police soon realized that Katrina could provide more information about the suspect since she was the main witness to the abduction. 2 days after the incident, investigators visited her home. They spoke with her and her parents, and the information she provided shocked them. Her description of the kidnapper greatly differed from the one provided by the store cashier. Katrina described him as a young white male in his early 20s with dirty blonde hair, severe acne scarring, and blue eyes. Katrina vividly recalled the suspect's eyes, describing them to investigators as fox eyes. She explained that despite his look straight at her, but he didn't seem to recognize her. Additionally, she told investigators that the suspect's car was beige or tan in color, box-shaped, and had noticeable body damage. The new description raises concerns as it means the crucial 48 hours to find a suspect has been wasted on finding the wrong person. Investigators reprinted posters with the new suspect's description and redistributed them throughout the area. Armed with this fresh information, they began visiting local sex offenders, inquiring about potential leads. A large number of volunteers joined, going door to door and distributing posters that detailed Michaela's clothing: a white Metro t-shirt, rolled-up blue denim jeans, black Mary Jane shoes, and pearl-colored feather-shaped earrings. After searching the nearby suburbs but finding no sign of Michaela, police expanded their search, include the Garin National Park and Niles Canyon, which are just a short distance from the She home. This decision was prompted by a tip from 3 hikers, who claimed to have found footprints in the forest area, belonging to 1 adult and 1 child. Upon following the tracks, the hikers discovered a blanket and empty fast food containers. A psychological analysis of the kidnapper suggested they would likely take Michaela to a secluded location. To aid in the search, helicopters were equipped with infrared thermal cameras to detect heat signatures in the dense wooded areas. Police officers also combed the area on horseback and on foot, but these efforts did not produce any results. Unfortunately, Michaela and her kidnapper seemed to have vanished without a trace. The search for Michaela made national headlines, and her case was featured on prominent television programs such as Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. Her photo was also distributed on milk cartons, and the Missing Children's program sent over 50 million mailing cards to homes across the country. These cards included a picture of Michaela, a description of her clothing, and a composite sketch of the kidnapper. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Joe Montana publicly showed his support for the Michaela family and urged the public to come forward with any information. A $70,000 reward was offered for any information related to Michaela's disappearance. Within the first year, the police received over 5,000 tips, the majority of which were unfounded rumors. Despite this, the community remained dedicated to finding Michaela. Sharon conducted her own investigation and found some clues, some taking her as far as Russia, but none produced any results. A significant break in the case occurred between 1991 and 1992, when an inmate in Indiana provided authorities with crucial information regarding Michaela's disappearance. Roger Haggard, who was serving an 11-year sentence for burglary, claimed to have helped a friend bury Michaela's body in a gladiolus field in Union City. At first, the investigators were skeptical and did not think his claims were credible enough to they be investigated further. Undeterred, Roger decided to reach out to the media for help. In 1992, he wrote a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, stating that he knew who had kidnapped Michaela and where her body was buried. He offered to lead investigators to the location. Hen investigators brought Roger to California to testify before a grand jury. Roger repeated his earlier claims under oath, promised to lead investigators to Michaela's burial site and the home of her killer. The next day, a team of investigators accompanied Roger to the field where he claimed Michaela's body was buried. After 8 hours of searching, Roger confessed that his claim was false. He explained that his intention was to provide the Michaela family a sense of peace after all these years. This confession had even more serious consequences for Roger. He was charged with perjury and received an additional 6 years prison sentence, along with an order to pay $6,000 in damages to Michaela's family for giving them false hope. This development would not be the only one to shake the investigation. Authorities also kept an eye on another individual, Lawrence Binder, 43, a wastewater treatment plant worker. He appeared to be a normal man, married with a family. However, suspicions were raised when investigators received a tip from East Bay Area parents about his disturbing behavior. These parents claimed that he had been sending gifts and money to young girls in an attempt to befriend them. What's more, some of the letters he wrote were written in reverse, requiring the recipient to use a mirror to decipher their meaning. As investigators dug deeper into Lawrence's past, they found that he drove a distinctive light blue van with the license plate, "Love You." The interior of the van was peculiarly decorated with photos of small children, children's drawings, and biblical verses. Furthermore, Lawrence had a previous arrest record for attempting to lure two young girls into his van, although the charges were eventually dropped. Lawrence often inserted himself into investigations of missing children. For instance, following the 1988 disappearance of Michaela, he reached out to her mother, Sharon. He also contacted Kim Schwartz, the mother of 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, who went missing in June 1988. In both cases, the mothers eventually told the police that they felt uneasy about Lawrence's persistence in contacting them and trying to stay updated on the developments in their daughters' cases. After uncovering a series of unusual circumstances, the investigation led authorities to suspect Lawrence of being involved in a series of child abductions. When Amber went missing, Lawrence wrote to the police predicting the next victim would be a 9-year-old girl. This proved true when Michaela missing. Lawrence further raised suspicions when he's sending a Christmas card with a picture of a girl holding up 4 fingers to an FBI profiler. This incident took on a more ominous tone when 4-year-old Amanda Campbell went missing on December 27, 1991. Lawrence was also linked to the disappearance of Eileen Mischelhoff, a 13-year-old girl from Dublin, California. As Lawrence's name became associated with the string of child abductions, he found himself under intense media scrutiny. His unusual behavior and fascination with the cases sparked widespread public interest, leading many people to suspect he was involved. As a result, Lawrence and his family faced harassment and public backlash. However, after Lawrence sued the city of Fairfield for defamation and won, investigators began to reassess his role in the case. It became clear that he was not as involved as initially thought, and many believed he was simply trying to insert himself into the investigation. Despite the mystery surrounding Lawrence, the case remained a complex challenge for investigators. In addition, there is a new suspect, Curtis Dean Anderson. He was arrested in August 2000 and subsequently linked to a series of heinous crimes. After his arrest, Anderson confessed to the 1999 abduction and murder of 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild from Vallejo, California. During a 2007 FBI interview, Anderson made a shocking claim: he had murdered 13 additional women and girls. He also admitted to abducting and killing 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, whom he had seen standing on a street corner. However, Curtis's life ended abruptly on December 9, 2007, when he died due to kidney and liver failure. This untimely death prevented investigators from gathering more information about Curtis's past crimes. Following his confession, investigators looked into Curtis's background and found a coincidence. In 1989, he was pulled over in a brown 1977 Chevy sedan, matched the vehicle description given by a witness named Katrina. Despite Curtis's death, his confession reignited interest in a more notorious case, the kidnapping of Michaela. The renewed investigation brought new attention and generated fresh leads. However, a new development in August 2012 shed more light on the case. Wesley Sherman, one half of the notorious Speed Freaks duo, reached out to the Stockton Record after his accomplice, Loren Herzog, took his own life in January that year. Wesley pointed out that Loren was to bear an uncanny resemblance to the suspect's composite in Michaela's case. The resemblance between Loren and the kidnapper is further confirmed by Katrina's observations, which indicate that Loren shares very similar characteristics to Michaela's kidnapper. Following a lead from Wesley, investigators began excavating a well in Linden, California, where him and Loren was believed to have disposed of Michaela's remains. The excavation uncovered thousands of bone fragments, some likely belonging to Michaela. Although investigators never lost hope of solving the case, the mystery continued to baffle them. It wasn't until 8 years later that a useful clue finally emerged. The circumstances surrounding Michaela's disappearance were horrifying and had a profound impact on the public. However, more shocking revelations were yet to come. On December 21, 2020, the Hayward Police Department and FBI made a significant announcement in the Michaela case, revealing a surprising development. Despite initial suspicions focusing on Loren and Wesley, but then investigators charged 61 years old David Garrick with Michaela's kidnapping and murder. Advances in technology played a crucial role in solving the case, by linking David's fingerprints to those found on Michaela's scooter 32 years earlier, in 1988. David Misch has been charged with the murder of Michaela and is currently in custody at Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County. An examination of David's past reveals a disturbing pattern of crime that dates back to his teenage years. Born on February 19, 1961, in Chicago, Illinois, little is known about David's upbringing. However, by the age of 16, he had already become involved in criminal activities. In 1977, he was convicted of breaking into a house where he sexually assaulted a maid at knife point. He was arrested and sentenced but was paroled just a year later, in 1978. David's troubles with the law continued. In February 1979, he was arrested for charges of false imprisonment and assault with a deadly weapon, which were later updated to assault with intent to rape. Despite this, he became eligible for parole in September 1981. Years later, in May 1988, David was arrested for burglary at a San Leandro grocery store. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 1 year of probation. In November of the same year, he was released from custody after 6 months. However, his luck eventually ran out in December 1988. That year, a tragic incident happened to his longtime friend Margaret Ball, who was 38 years old. She often helped him in times of need, but the nature of their relationship took a drastic turn. Margaret's dead body was discovered by her stepdaughter in a pool of blood, brutally beaten and stabbed. The crime scene was particularly gruesome, with Margaret's front tooth found a few feet away from her body due to the severity of the beating. The police were led to David as the primary suspect after discovering evidence linking him to the crime. He was arrested and eventually convicted of Margaret's murder. While David was already serving time for Margaret's murder, new evidence led to additional charges against him. In 2018, he was sentenced to 18 years to life for Margaret's murder. A DNA analysis later implicated David in 2 murders that occurred in Fremont, California, in 1986. 2 young women, Michelle Xavier, 18, and her best friend, Jennifer Dewey, 20, had gone out to celebrate a family member's birthday dinner on February 2, 1986. After leaving the restaurant, they stopped at a convenience store. However, shortly after midnight, their bodies were found on the side of the road by a motorcyclist. The scene revealed a disturbing and violent crime. The women were stripped naked, they had been stabbed and shot. An autopsy later revealed that they had also been sexually assaulted. The car Michelle was driving was discovered 6 miles away from the crime scene in a grocery store parking lot. Michaela's case was forgotten for many years due to lack of clues and information. However, 32 years later, advances in DNA technology led detectives to a suspect, David Garrick. He is currently serving time, faces additional charges, including 3 counts of murder and 1 count of abduction, which could result in the death penalty. Chief Hayward vowed to continue the search for Michaela's body and remains hopeful that she will be found. Michaela's father, Rod Garrick, traveled over 100 miles to attend a recent press conference. He expressed a sense of relief knowing that the police have caught suspect. The authorities have a suspect to question, and hopefully, this person will provide information about Michaela's whereabouts. Sharon, Michaela's mother, was unable to attend a press conference due to her ongoing battle with metastatic cancer. Police Chief Hayward read a statement on her behalf, which revealed her struggle to accept the reality of her daughter's fate. In the past year, she had to accept the likelihood that Michaela was no longer alive. However, she found comfort in imagining her in a peaceful afterlife, sitting on clouds, walking on golden streets, dancing on hills, and so a ring among the stars. Bernie Castillo, the attorney for David, has been vocal about the case and strongly criticizes the investigation methods used to charge his client. He dismisses the evidence as junk science and finds it implausible that a handprint match was suddenly found after 32 years. Bernie believes the police are trying to pin the blame solely on David as a convenient way to close the case. Meanwhile, Katrina, Michaela's close friend and witness to the case, has been carrying guilt over, still remembers the tragic incident that occurred that Saturday morning. She feels that it should have been her, as the scooter that was moved belonged to her. This burden of guilt has caused Katrina to suppress memories of her childhood. In contrast, Sharon, Michaela's mother, dedicated her life to finding her daughter. Initially, she waited anxiously for news at the telephone and later turned to the internet for answers. However, after David was charged with Michaela's murder, Sharon's fight for justice began to fade due to her cancer diagnosis. She eventually passed away in May 2022, finding solace in the fact that she would soon be reunited with her daughter. A new twist has arisen in the complicated case of David, who is currently awaiting trial for his alleged involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Michaela, as well as the murders of Michelle and Jennifer. The search for justice for Michaela has been going on for decades, but may now face a significant obstacle. It seems David, the suspect, might not face the full severity of the punishment for the allegations against him. In contrast, David's defense attorney, Ernie, viewed the news as validation, stating that each case against David relies on questionable forensic tactics. Bernie was not surprised by the decision, as it confirms his long-held belief that the prosecution's case has significant weaknesses. Others, however, disagree with the decision. Chuck Euler, a retired lieutenant who worked on another case involving David, believed he should receive the maximum sentence for his crimes. David is currently awaiting trial for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of kidnapping. His case is closely tied to the mysterious disappearance of Michaela, a story filled with unexpected twists and turns. However, the investigation was marred by an initial case of mistaken identity, leading police to waste valuable time in the first 2 days. As a result, Michaela's family was left searching for answers for decades. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Elizabeth Nicole Forshee-Cyperda. Elizabeth was born on May 13, 1978, in Truckee, California. She lived with her parents and younger brother. When Elizabeth was 13, the Cyperda family moved across the street. Michael and Sally Cyperda had 2 young children and were struggling to balance work and family. Michael wanted Sally to go back to work, so they decided to find a babysitter. Michael suggested hiring Elizabeth, then 14, to babysit their children. Sally agreed, and Elizabeth began babysitting for the neighbor's family. Elizabeth grew attached to Michael and Sally's children as she spent more time with them. The children also enjoyed being around her. When Elizabeth was 15, her father passed away, a traumatic event that deeply affected her. According to her mother, Donna Forshee, Elizabeth became more sensitive and vulnerable after this event. She began to admire and grow closer to Michael Cyperda, seeing him as an ideal father figure. Elizabeth believes that Michael loves his children unconditionally and supports their interests. Elizabeth used to babysit Michael and Sally's children during the day. However, she started staying at their house until late at night. This continued for about 2 years. One day, Michael decided to move to Iowa with his family to be closer to his relatives. He invited Elizabeth to come along as a babysitter. Elizabeth's mother, Donna, strongly objected and tried to stop her daughter, even calling Child Protective Services to intervene. However, Donna's efforts were in vain. Elizabeth was too attached to Michael, Sally, and their 2 children. Although she was still in high school, she was determined to stick with her decision and moved to Winfield, Iowa with Cyperda's family. After Elizabeth moved away, her mother Donna and her best friend Shannon Gerber maintained regular contact with her, either by phone or by weekly letters. Elizabeth graduated from high school in Iowa in May 1997. Donna attended her graduation and gave her daughter an emerald and diamond ring, which Elizabeth treasured. During this time, Michael divorced his wife, Sally, and began a relationship with Elizabeth. After the divorce, Sally left the children with Michael and Elizabeth and moved away. Although Sally maintained contact with her children, she cut off all contact with Michael and stopped speaking to Elizabeth. Michael, then in her 40s, immediately demonstrated his controlling nature. He limited what Elizabeth could and could not do, as well as who she could talk to. He attempted to control every aspect of Elizabeth's life. From the beginning, their relationship seemed dysfunctional. As a result, Elizabeth's mother and best friend Shannon found it increasingly difficult to contact her. Michael did not like Elizabeth talking to them and would often get angry if she did. As a result, Elizabeth would only dare to call them when Michael was not home. During this time, Elizabeth became friends with Harper Tracy through church. Harper noticed that Elizabeth had suffered 5 or 6 injuries during their friendship, including finger marks on her neck and bruises on her stomach. Harper's daughter, Sadie, who was about 7 years old, knew Michael's children through church and occasionally played at their home. Sadie remembers one time when she visited, she witnessed Michael pushing Elizabeth down the stairs and kneeling on her. Harper also remembers Elizabeth arriving at church in a state of panic and fear after fleeing a violent argument with Michael. Elizabeth confided that she was afraid of Michael and could not take any more abuse. Harper discovered multiple bruises on Elizabeth's stomach and marks on her arms. Elizabeth stayed in Harper's trailer for a month. During that time, Michael appeared near the trailer almost every day and acted threateningly. He would park his truck about 10 feet away from the trailer and tease Elizabeth. Specifically, he threatened her by saying that Elizabeth would be isolated and no one would find her if she did not listen to him. He left hazmat notices and a torn cat collar outside, along with a message warning that she would disappear like the cat if she did not return. He also threatened to harm the family's animals and began blackmailing her with videotapes and photos he had. According to Harper, he threatened to kill Elizabeth and dispose of her body 6 times. Harper called the police to stop him, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. There were clearly many warning signs about Michael. Everyone saw him as someone to stay away from. However, Elizabeth was young and naive, so she still hoped that Michael would change. Unfortunately, at the age of 40, people rarely change their behavior and attitude towards others. After a long time of pressure from Michael, eventually, Elizabeth decided to leave Harper's trail to live with Michael. They married in January 1998 in Mount Pleasant. Despite her attempts to prevent the marriage, Harper attended their wedding. Afterwards, Michael took the initiative to cut off all contact between Harper and Elizabeth. At Michael's request, Elizabeth finally told Harper not to come to their house anymore. Harper was not the only one concerned about Elizabeth and Michael's marriage. Elizabeth's mother, Donna, also disapproved of the relationship and refused to come to Iowa for her daughter's wedding. However, in June 2000, Elizabeth went to California to attend her younger brother's high school graduation. Although Michael stayed in Iowa, he continued to keep an eye on Elizabeth. During the 3 days Elizabeth stayed with her mother, Michael called her repeatedly. He was concerned that Donna was trying to influence Elizabeth not to return to Iowa. After each call, Elizabeth felt sad and confused. She considered leaving her husband but was not sure. To reassure Michael, Elizabeth moved out of her mother's house and moved in with Shannon Gerber, her childhood friend. Shannon had kept in touch with Elizabeth since Elizabeth moved to Iowa. They tried to talk every month, often calling when Michael was not home. However, Elizabeth's move to live with her friend did not lessen Michael's anger. Instead, he began harassing Shannon by calling her repeatedly. Most of the calls were threatening. Shannon recalled Michael threatening Elizabeth. He screamed at her and said he would kill her if she did not come home. Michael also threatened to kill Elizabeth's mother, younger brother, Shannon, and her young son. He called her constantly, day and night, sometimes dozens of times an hour. Finally, Shannon's husband couldn't take it anymore and turned off the phone. This clearly made Michael even angrier. Shannon begged Elizabeth not to return to Iowa. "I didn't want her to go because I was afraid I would never see her again," Shannon confided. She deliberately took a detour to the airport, hoping Elizabeth would miss her flight. However, the flight was delayed and Elizabeth was still able to catch it. After returning to Mount Pleasant, Iowa, Elizabeth began working at Experian. There, she met Sarah Thomas, a coworker who quickly became her best friend. Because Sarah lived near the Sipura family home, she often took Elizabeth home after work. During these trips, they talked a lot and Elizabeth gradually trusted Sarah. She shared with Sarah about her difficult relationship with her husband, Michael, and even showed Sarah the bruises on her body that Michael had caused. Elizabeth and Sarah became very close to each other, close enough to cause problems. One day, while Michael was away, his two children peered through the bedroom keyhole and saw Sarah and Elizabeth getting intimate. When Elizabeth discovered that the children had witnessed the scene, she hastily packed up and moved in with Sarah. When Sarah's girlfriend, Terry, went outside to walk the dog, Michael came over and asked her to call Sarah's work phone and ask Elizabeth to return home. He had a bottle of alcohol in his hand, and his children were following him and crying. Michael explained that his wife had left him, she was not answering his calls, and he did not know what to do. When Elizabeth and Sarah entered the apartment, they saw Michael and Terry waiting for them. Frightened, Elizabeth and Sarah left. Michael shouted at Terry to follow him. They got into the car and gave chase. The two couples met face to face in a nearby parking lot. Terry started fighting with Sarah because she felt betrayed. Elizabeth was sitting in the car at the time and was afraid to get out. Cursing, screaming, and threatening, Michael approached Elizabeth and dragged her out through the window of the car. During the struggle, Elizabeth suffered a lacerated rib, and her shirt got torn. Sarah and Elizabeth fled to a nearby gas station, where they reported the assault to the police. The state charged Michael with first-degree burglary and domestic abuse assault. The court approved the no-contact order protecting Elizabeth. Terry packed her things and left, so Elizabeth and Sarah started living together. Michael continued to harass Sarah despite a ban. He would sit across the street, shouting insults or verbally abusing her. Additionally, Sarah received numerous incoming phone calls, but whenever she picked up, the caller would remain silent. She filed a report with the police, who worked with her phone company to set up a trap on her line to track the origin of these calls. Over a 3-week period, from June 26th to July 16th, Sarah's phone records revealed Michael made 162 calls to her apartment. On July 16, 2000, 1 month after her breakup with Michael, Sarah left for work at 10:30 p.m. At the time, Elizabeth was asleep on the couch. Their dog was safely locked in the bathroom to avoid disturbing Elizabeth when Sarah returned home at 4 a.m. However, upon arriving back, Sarah was surprised to find that Elizabeth had vanished. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle, and Elizabeth's personal documents remained intact. The dog was still locked in the bathroom. Sarah decided to go to bed. When she awoke the next morning, Elizabeth was still missing. It became clear that Elizabeth had left without taking her purse, clothes, or other essential belongings, and she did not leave behind any note or explanation. Sarah reported Elizabeth's disappearance to the police 24 hours after first discovering she was gone. Elizabeth was 22 years old when she disappeared. The police launched an investigation, and of course, Michael was their first suspect. On July 16th, the day Elizabeth disappeared, Michael started phoning the apartment around 3 p.m., logging more than a dozen calls through the evening. He last called at 10:56 p.m., that is, he stopped making calls 26 minutes after Sarah left for work and left Elizabeth alone. On July 17th, Michael was supposed to be at work. His friend Jared agreed to watch Michael's children. Jared testified he found Michael was pretty intoxicated when he arrived at his house around 5:30 a.m. Jared said Michael told him Elizabeth had stayed overnight and left around 5 a.m. Michael decided not to go to work that morning. Police called Michael the next day, July 18th, to ask if he had heard from Elizabeth. He said he had not. On July 20th, officers came to his house to let him know Elizabeth was missing. Michael said his taking a sick day from work on July 17th, the day after Elizabeth disappeared, was a coincidence. Michael also stated that due to their breakup, he hadn't been eating and had been getting cramps. Elizabeth seemed to disappear into thin air. She didn't contact her family or friends, her bank account was untouched, and she had not even received her salary for the last month. The investigators knew that Elizabeth could not just leave without documents and money. All the friends she could have stayed with knew nothing about her whereabouts. The police interviewed residents and distributed flyers with an image and description of Elizabeth, but none of these actions gave the desired result. In early September 2000, Larry Headland, an agent with the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation, interviewed Michael. During the interview, Michael claimed that he and Elizabeth had a harmonious relationship and denied any allegations of abuse between them. When asked about the attack on Elizabeth on June 16th, Michael admitted that it was an unusual action on his part. He explained that he had been drinking and that his emotions had taken over, leading to his inappropriate actions. Initially, Michael denied making the harassing phone calls to Sarah's apartment. However, when presented with evidence from the call records, he admitted responsibility. The agent then pointed out that the calls to Michael's apartment had stopped the night Elizabeth went missing. This caused Michael to become stressed. Michael explained that he just wanted to avoid arrest and did not want to be charged or held responsible for anything. That's why he lied about the phone calls. He objected when Larry suggested that Elizabeth was dead. After this interview, the police obtained a search warrant for Michael's home. In Michael's bedroom, the police found an unlocked safe. Inside or on top of the safe, an officer found a $2,000 gold pendant that Michael had given Elizabeth and a V-shaped diamond and emerald ring that she had received from her mother as a graduation gift. Elizabeth only removed the ring when she was showering or soaking in the tub, otherwise, it was on her finger. In police photos taken after Michael attacked Elizabeth, the ring was still on her hand. Elizabeth had not been back to Michael's house since. So how did the ring end up in Michael's safe? When the police asked for an explanation, Michael said that Elizabeth must have left it behind when she moved out. However, officer pointed out that Elizabeth was still wearing the ring in a photo taken on June 16th, the day of the attack. Michael could not explain why the ring was in his bedroom. There are some suspicious points in Elizabeth's disappearance. Michael abruptly stopped contacting her on the day she disappeared, although the police only notified him 4 days later. This suggests that Michael may be hiding something. However, the police need concrete evidence to charge him. Time has passed so quickly that it is difficult to find clues. One possibility is that Elizabeth voluntarily went into hiding. But her family does not believe this. Although the case has been quiet for many years, her mother, Donna, has not lost hope that her daughter will return. Every year, she travels to Iowa, where Elizabeth used to live, to organize activities to raise awareness about her daughter's disappearance. In 2010, Donna rented a billboard with Elizabeth's picture and offered a $20,000 reward for any information about her daughter. Donna said she was concerned that something might have happened to her daughter, but she was hopeful that she would eventually be found. "Someone definitely knows what happened to my daughter, and I hope that us coming out will jog their memory," she said. 10 years after her daughter's disappearance, Donna has developed her own theories about what happened. In an interview, she said, "I think the person called her and lured her out of the apartment to meet them. Then they argued and something bad happened that night." Despite the best efforts of the police and her family, Elizabeth's fate remains a mystery. Since her disappearance in 2000, investigators have searched 79 different locations but have not found Elizabeth's body. They entered her information into the National Crime Information Center's Missing Persons database. 17 years later, in 2017, the investigation was reopened. By this time, Michael Sieperta had moved to Colorado. Police reviewed all the evidence and interviews. They discovered a key detail that had previously been overlooked. Jared, Michael's friend who was assigned to watch Michael's children on July 17, 2000, told police that when he arrived at Michael's house at 5:30 a.m., he found Michael quite drunk. According to Jared's testimony, Michael said that Elizabeth had stayed the night and left around 5 a.m. However, in previous interviews, Michael had never mentioned Elizabeth sleeping over at his house. More significantly, Elizabeth's jewelry was found in Michael's safe. Authorities decided to arrest Michael 17 years after Elizabeth went missing. Although her body was never found, investigators believe that Elizabeth was dead and that Michael was the culprit. In November 2017, Michael was arrested in Colorado and extradited to Iowa, where he was charged with first-degree murder in the death of his wife Elizabeth. Donna said, "This is the best news we've had in 17 years. We've waited a long time and are so glad that he's finally been arrested." Michael later waived his right to a jury trial. The loss of key physical evidence, especially the victim's body, made it significantly more difficult for prosecutors to prove guilt. Without a body, forensic experts could not determine the cause of death, and the jury could not directly observe the victim's injuries or view crime scene photos. The defense argued that the prosecutor's goal was not to find the truth, but to convict Michael by looking for inconsistencies in witness testimony. Although the trial took place 18 years after the incident, the defense acknowledged during closing arguments that a body was not required to establish a homicide. However, Michael still challenged the state's evidence of Elizabeth's death. The district court concluded that the state had proven her death beyond a reasonable doubt. The court held that any theory that Elizabeth was still alive and could reappear at any time was unrealistic. The state presented evidence that Michael was the last person to speak to Elizabeth at 10:56 p.m. on July 16, which he himself admitted. The district court noted Jared's testimony that Michael told Elizabeth to stay at his house that night. In addition, there were other suspicious circumstances. Michael unexpectedly left work on July 17 and did not call Elizabeth's apartment again, even though the police did not officially report her missing until July 20. From this evidence, the state established that Michael's hatred of Elizabeth led to murder. Because Michael was controlling and possessive of Elizabeth, it was highly likely that he intentionally caused her physical harm when she decided to leave him for someone else. The strained relationship between them was clear evidence of Michael's intentional intent to cause harm. The state presented evidence that Michael had repeatedly threatened to kill Elizabeth and dispose of her body so that no one would find it. From these repeated threats, the jury could conclude that Michael had intended to kill Elizabeth. The court reviewed the evidence and made a crucial decision. They discovered that Elizabeth had opened a new bank account just 9 days before her disappearance, but had not withdrawn her last paycheck, they concluded that she was dead. After carefully evaluating all the evidence, the court found that Michael was responsible for Elizabeth's death. On June 25, 2018, Michael Cyperta, 58, was convicted of first-degree murder. On August 23, 2018, the court sentenced him to life in prison without parole and ordered him to pay $150,000 in restitution for Elizabeth's death. However, the story does not end there. In September 2020, the Iowa Court of Appeals changed Michael Cyperta's conviction from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. Judge Mary Tabor, in a 30-page ruling, noted that while there was enough evidence to conclude that Elizabeth was dead and that Michael was responsible, the prosecutor failed to prove that Michael intended to kill Elizabeth. This led to the reduced charge. The case was particularly difficult because there was no body, weapon, or crime scene. Michael asked to be released or at least given a new trial. Ultimately, the court sentenced Michael Cyperta to 50 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jennifer Schuett. Jennifer Schuett was an 8-year-old girl who had just finished school for the day. She lived with her single mother, Elaine, who worked hard to ensure that her daughter was happy and well taken care of. Elaine juggled multiple jobs to support their family and give Jennifer a joyful childhood. With all the love and attention she received, Jennifer grew into a bright and cheerful child, showing a strong enthusiasm for learning and a natural curiosity at such a young age. Jennifer mentioned that children often fear the dark, and she was no different. She admitted that she was afraid of the dark and often slept in the same room as her mother. She recalled that from what she could remember about her childhood, she just didn't like the dark or sleeping alone, and so she felt comforted by going to bed with her mom. She stated that it was just the two of them, and they relied on each other. That night, on August 9, 2009, Jennifer and her mother, Elaine, shared a room. Jennifer was restless, tossing and turning and occasionally kicking her mom, which made it hard for Elaine to fall asleep. At 2:30 a.m., Elaine woke up and asked Jennifer to return to her own room since she had to get up early for work. In response, Jennifer said, "Mom, I love you, so I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight," and went back to her room. Elaine would later deeply regret this decision, but at that moment, she had no way of knowing what would happen next. The next morning, Elaine found that Jennifer was missing when she went to wake her up. She saw that the window facing the parking lot was wide open. Elaine quickly called 911. When the police arrived, she explained that she hadn't heard any sounds or screams after Jennifer went to her room. It's important to note that their apartment was on the first floor, and Jennifer's windows overlooked the parking lot. This made Elaine worry that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered her room through the window. Elaine understood that their apartment wasn't the best place for her and her young daughter, but it was all they could afford at that time. However, Elaine's parents stepped in to assist her and their granddaughter by buying a small house nearby and renovating it. Jennifer and her mother were set to move into the new house in a few months. The day before Jennifer went missing, they had been working in the garden there, where Jennifer had been bitten by mosquitoes, making it difficult for her to sleep peacefully that night. After her daughter went missing, Elaine was heartbroken. She expressed that Jennifer was her only child and begged for her safe return. The police dedicated themselves to finding her. Fortunately, Elaine received news sooner than expected. Later that day, around 6:30 p.m., the police got a call from parents whose children were playing in a field and discovered something alarming. To their shock, they realized it was a young girl. When the police arrived at the scene, they found 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett's body in the middle of the field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer was in a serious condition, but she was still breathing. She had a deep cut across her throat. The most life-threatening injury was this wound, which led to significant blood loss and left her very pale and weak. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors worked hard to save her life. One doctor recalled that when he first saw Jennifer in the emergency room, she was a fairly small 8-year-old, very pale, and covered with ant bites and scratches on her back. He mentioned that she couldn't make any sounds because of the injury to her neck. Fortunately, he added that after the operation, Jennifer's condition stabilized and the bleeding stopped. He stated that they had completed her surgery, her airway was stable, and she wasn't bleeding, so they were very hopeful about her survival. When she regained consciousness after the surgery, her behavior underwent a sudden change. It turned out that she was afraid of all men. She later recounted that she had been kind of a hard patient to deal with because she had a lot of male doctors, and she was scared of males. Additionally, the Dickinson Police Department deployed a whole team to guard her hospital room. Throughout this time, Jennifer was in a constant state of panic. She even hit a doctor in the stomach when he tried to approach her. Elaine tried to comfort her daughter by explaining that everyone present was there to help her. Despite this, Jennifer remained distrustful of those around her. Her behavior became clearer when she disclosed what had happened to her that night. An investigator noted that they knew they had a survivor who couldn't speak and that the challenge was getting information from her. After all, she was only 8 years old, so it was tough. Because Jennifer was too scared to speak directly to the investigator, the detectives provided her with a notebook and pens. They asked her to write down her answers to their questions. Jennifer communicated through notes to her mother, who then relayed the note to the officer. Surprisingly, her written responses were very detailed and accurately described the events. Despite her young age, Jennifer demonstrated impressive intelligence. According to the note, that night, Jennifer entered her room, turned on the light, and picked up a book to read, hoping it would make her sleepy. It worked, and she soon fell asleep. Suddenly, she woke up to find the stranger carrying her out of the house. She said that he was running with her down the sidewalk and that she tried to scream, but he covered her nose and mouth. Afterward, he put her in a car and identified himself as an undercover police officer. Immediately, Jennifer felt that something was off, as she noticed her mother's car in the parking lot, which left her puzzled about their destination. While she understood that police are generally trusted, her mother had always warned her not to trust strangers. Jennifer recalled that as a child, she had wanted to believe the stranger, but the lessons she had learned about strangers in school, along with her fear of the dark, told her that something was seriously wrong. When they passed her grandparents' house, Jennifer suggested that he could drop her off there, but he replied that he couldn't because they were not home. At that moment, she realized that he was lying since their car was parked in the driveway. The man had stopped near Jennifer's school, which was about 3 kilometers from her house. He had told her to watch the moon closely and said that when it changed color, her mother would arrive to pick her up. Jennifer recalled waiting anxiously for her mother's headlights, but they never appeared. At that moment, she sensed that the man was mentally preparing himself for his true intentions. After 5 minutes, the stranger remarked that her mom wasn't coming, so they needed to go farther. He then drove a few more blocks to a dead-end street and stopped the car. Jennifer once again sought confirmation that he was a genuine policeman. She mentioned that she was questioning him and needed him to prove he was an officer. She asked him where his gun and badge were. He responded that his gun was in the back seat of the car. As Jennifer turned to look for it, the suspicious officer removed her underwear. Jennifer lost track of time while in the stranger's grip because she passed out. She only became aware of her surroundings again when he was pulling her by her ankles through the field. Despite the intense pain caused by twigs and stones pressing into her back, she acted as if she were dead and remained silent, knowing that this was her opportunity to survive. He eventually released her feet and left her alone in the field. Jennifer heard him walking away, followed by the sound of his car door slamming and the engine starting as he drove off. She realized that she couldn't scream and didn't understand why. She managed to place her right hand on her neck and felt a deep wound. Looking at her hand, she saw it covered in blood. Since the exact time of her disappearance was unknown, it was thought that she lay in the field for 12 to 14 hours. As the sun set, she noticed the lights of passing cars nearby. She heard children's voices and a dog that approached her several times, seemingly trying to get its owner's attention, but the owner never came. During this time, she was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay awake. Jennifer stated that every time she regained consciousness, she was shocked that she was still alive. She said she wasn't afraid and had accepted that she might not survive. Suddenly, she heard children's voices nearby, and then something hit her leg. When Jennifer next regained consciousness, she heard a police officer saying, "You've been found. You're going to be okay. Just please stay with me." She remembered being loaded into the life flight helicopter. This experience was very difficult for young Jennifer because she couldn't speak and had to communicate by writing everything down. Her fear of men added to the tension, so her mother asked the questions, and Jennifer's responses were passed on to the officers outside the door. Remarkably, 8-year-old Jennifer was able to get the stranger's name. "I just remember recalling his name, so I wrote that he said his name was Dennis. I remember thinking he looked greasy and that he might have had a scar or something on his face." For days after Jennifer went missing, the police enlisted the help of forensic expert Lois Gibson. She communicated with Jennifer using gestures and notes. Despite these difficulties, they created a detailed composite sketch of a man, which was released to the public in hopes of receiving information. While this was happening, police searched the crime scene and discovered Jennifer's clothing about half a mile away, along with a man's shirt and underwear. Unfortunately, DNA testing on the clothing did not yield any matches to a suspect. Jennifer's recovery took time, but she demonstrated incredible strength for someone her age. There was a particularly tough moment when she became upset over a chocolate bar she couldn't eat, screamed in frustration, and made a faint sound. Doctors were surprised because her vocal cords had been nearly severed, and they didn't expect them to heal, yet they started to recover. Soon after, Jennifer was released from the hospital. She returned home and resumed her studies. After finishing school and college, she chose to become a children's librarian. However, she never forgot the traumatic events of that night. Every day felt like a search for her attacker. She wondered if he could be anyone around her. Could it be our new neighbor? Someone at the post office or the grocery store? Is he watching us? Will he come back to finish what he started? Fortunately, Jennifer met a man named Jonathan, and for the first time in years, she felt she could trust someone. They fell in love. Meanwhile, the investigation into her attacker stalled. The chances of finding him diminished as time passed, and the case remained unresolved, moving from one investigator to another without progress. 18 years after that dreadful night, Jennifer received a phone call. She learned that Detective Tim Cromie would be taking over her case and that he wanted to meet with her. Tim Cromie promised to do everything possible to catch the criminal, and Jennifer believed him. He told her that he would do whatever he could in his power until the end of his career to get her the answers she needed for the case. Tim decided to involve FBI Special Agent Richard Renison in the case. Richard had previously worked for the Dickinson, Texas Police Department before joining the FBI. Together, Tim and Richard uncovered a significant amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing and shortly after she was found. Key pieces of evidence included Jennifer's underwear, as well as the perpetrator's shirt and underwear. They sent a DNA sample found on these items to the lab in Quantico, Virginia. While detectives recognized that DNA analysis technology had improved significantly over the past 19 years, they also knew that the age of the case would make it less of a priority in the lab. Investigating cold cases often comes with the challenge of time, as witnesses forget, people move away, and some may even pass away. However, One advantage of this case's age was the advancements in DNA technology that could aid their investigation. A year later, their efforts were finally recognized. The man whose DNA was discovered at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford, the same name that Jennifer had identified years earlier. Remarkably, the 8-year-old girl had been extremely precise in her descriptions. Despite being on pain medication, unable to speak, and only 8 years old, she wrote down the name Dennis. This was a significant indication of her accuracy. In fact, it later became clear just how precise she was about many details. Dennis Bradford, now 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and his DNA had been entered into the national database after he assaulted a woman in a bar in 1996. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison but only served 4. On February 4, 2000, he was conditionally released, and less than a year later, he was arrested for driving under the influence, just half a mile from his home. He remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Tim Cromie and Richard Renison looked into the connection between a suspect from North Little Rock, Arkansas, and Dickinson, Texas, a small town. They discovered that the man had been arrested in Dickinson in 1987, 3 years before Jennifer's attack. At that time, he had 2 addresses located within 2 miles of Jennifer and Elaine's apartment. To verify that he was the kidnapper, detectives requested a 19-year-old photo from his driver's license. When they saw the photo, they were shocked because it resembled the composite sketch made with input from 8-year-old Jennifer. One detective asked if Dennis had ever heard the name Jennifer Shuett, to which he replied affirmatively. The detective then inquired if Dennis had ever had the occasion to come into contact with her, and the suspect again confirmed this. When asked to elaborate, Dennis hesitated, stating that it was a lot to explain, but he believed that if the detective were to see her, he would be extremely proud of her. Finally, and the suspect stated that Jennifer was alive, repeating that she was alive. The detective reacted with disbelief, exclaiming, "Oh God." The suspect responded by saying that the detective had no idea how hard he had prayed for that, mentioning that he was a believer in Christ but had no idea about her status. He added that it was just about 2 days later when he ran away and took off. Dennis Earl Bradford was arrested on October 19, 2009. He claimed he didn't know Jennifer, couldn't remember why he had stopped near her apartment, and didn't understand why he had acted so cruelly towards her. Bradford also shared a significant detail that investigators were unaware of. After the attack, he felt intense guilt. He wanted to pull the trigger but ultimately changed his mind. Following this, he was admitted to a psychiatric ward, which was the same hospital where Jennifer was still receiving treatment at that time. He had been very close to her at that time. Immediately after the interrogation, detectives informed Jennifer that the criminal they had been searching for 19 years had been arrested. Jennifer expressed that when they called her that morning and told her that they had really arrested Dennis Bradford, it was the most moment of her life and meant everything to her. She conveyed her gratitude to the detectives for fulfilling their promise and, above all, wanted to thank Detective Tim Cromie from the Dickinson Police Department and Special Agent Richard Renison from the FBI for all their hard work and dedication over the last year and a half. She emphasized that their promise from day one, never giving up on her case and hearing her voice while seeing her determination, meant a lot to her. Jennifer also admitted her anticipation of facing Dennis Bradford in the courtroom since he was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial. Jennifer was given the opportunity to select the court date and chose August 10, the 20th anniversary of the attack. She mentioned that she remembered staying up late, endless nights, trying to perfect her victim impact statement, writing, erasing, and writing again, just trying to perfect what she wanted to say. She said that she had 19 years worth of things to say to that person. However, it was not meant to happen. On May 10, 2010, a few months before the trial, Dennis hung in his jail cell, which made her feel that her right to see the case through to the end had been taken away. Jennifer went to Dennis's grave and read aloud what she wanted to say in court, stating that Dennis Bradford had chosen the wrong little 8-year-old girl to try and murder because for 19 years she had thought of him every single day and had helped in searching for him. She expressed that in her heart, she knew he was out there, and now she realized that by listening to her heart all those years and never giving up on finding him, she had been right. After finishing her speech, Jennifer turned to her husband and wondered if Dennis had hurt her. At that moment, a fiery ant bit her leg, and she took it as a sign from God that he had heard her loud and clear. Jennifer reflected on her experiences, mentioning that despite the horrific events caused by Dennis's actions, she faced yet another challenge in her life. She explained that as a result of the trauma, she almost lost the ability to conceive a child. However, she noted that amidst the darkness, there were shining examples of kindness, particularly from Dr. Craig Witz, who, after hearing her story, generously offered his services to her twice, free of charge. She shared that at the end of 2012, she and her partner welcomed their daughter Jenna and later their son Jonah, expressing her disbelief by saying that it felt like a dream and questioning who would have thought that they would really be her happy ending. The criminal tried to silence her and take away her right to be a mother, but he failed. Jennifer desires for her story to be shared, not for her own sake, but for others who have endured similar ordeals and must cope with them every day. She mentioned that they have gone through something in life that they can talk about, and she believes it is worth sharing it with others to instill hope. She expressed her hope that this would inspire others to use their voice to help someone else. Jennifer also added that, in the end, she is not a victim but instead victorious. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Daniel Wozniak. Costa Mesa, California, is located between Los Angeles and San Diego on a coastal plateau overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Despite being an affluent area, it still retains the laid-back atmosphere of a beach town. No one expected this picturesque location to be the site of Julie Kibushi's tragic fate. Sam Har's parents, Stephen and Raquel, were worried when they realized they hadn't heard from him in a while. Sam was scheduled to visit them that weekend, but he never arrived. On May 22, 2010, his parents Stephen and Raquel went to Sam's apartment. When they arrived, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Stephen, in a panic, quickly called 911. During the call, he informed the police that there was a dead woman lying face down in his son's bedroom, her clothes partially torn and blood dripping from her forehead. "Do you know where your son is?" the dispatcher asked. "No, I don't," came the reply. But there was no sign of Sam anywhere. The case shocked the Costa Mesa community, where homicides are extremely rare. When police arrived at the apartment, they found no evidence of a struggle. The apartment was neat and showed no signs of a struggle. The space contained typical bachelor items like empty beer bottles, used cigarettes, and an outdoor grill, all of which were relatively clean and tidy. Until they entered the bedroom. In the bedroom, police found an unused knife on the nightstand and several books, including a fighting manual and another titled The Wonders of Sex. The most alarming discovery, however, was on the bed. It was covered in the victim's blood. The dead woman was lying partly on the bed and partly on the floor, her pants down, exposing her lower body. Police believe she may have been sexually assaulted before her death. She died of 2 gunshot wounds to the head, 1 to the top of her head. Although there was a knife on the nightstand, it did not appear to have been used. Curiously, she was wearing a crown, and the back of her sweater read, "All yours." Her purse was in the kitchen, and her driver's license identified the victim as 23-year-old Julie Kibushi. Julie was born on Valentine's Day 1987 to Japanese-American parents June and Masa Kibushi. She was the third of their 4 children. Her parents often called her "my Valentine girl." From an early age, Julie developed a strong interest in dance and music. Her mother said that Julie started tap dancing at the age of 5, and her passion for the sport continued to grow over the years. According to her friends and family, she was a very cheerful person. Her cheerful and bubbly personality brought laughter to everyone. She radiated positivity and often helped her friends when they were in trouble. While respecting her Japanese heritage, she also pursued a free-spirited, all-American lifestyle. After graduating from the Orange County School of the Arts, Julie pursued fashion design at Orange Coast Community College. There, she formed a close relationship with 26-year-old Sam Har and even tutored him in anthropology. Little did she know that her kindness would eventually lead to her tragic fate. As the police investigated the crime scene, they attempted to discover what happened to this energetic young woman, Julie. The evidence clearly pointed to Sam as her killer. Since she was found in his apartment and he was now missing, the police needed to dig deeper into Sam Har's life. Sam Har was born on May 29, 1983, in Los Angeles, California, to Stephen and Raquel Kalberman. As an only child, he received a lot of affection from his parents. His father was a special education teacher while his mother stayed home. Sam had a close relationship with his parents and visited them often. Sam was large and athletic, and friends described him as a big teddy bear. As a child, he enlisted in the United States Army, serving a tour of duty in both Afghanistan and Germany with the 173rd Airborne Division. After 3 years of service, he was discharged and returned to Southern California to take advantage of the GI Bill and finish college. Sam aimed to finish college and then re-enlist in the Army as an officer. Sam enrolled in Orange Coast Community College there. He became friends with Julie, who was 3 years younger than him. However, after 3 years in the Army, Sam developed PTSD, a common condition among veterans. Police wondered if he had lost control and committed the crime in a moment of intense emotion. When Julie was found dead in Sam's apartment and he was missing, detectives suspected that he had fled the scene after the murder. The situation became more suspicious when they discovered text messages on Julie's phone from Sam. At around 2:45 p.m. on May 21, 2010, Sam texted Julie to say he was going to help a friend and then come to his parents' house. However, just 2 hours later, his text messages changed. He contacted her multiple times, begging her to come over. The urgency in his messages made it clear that something was wrong. Concerned about her friend, Julie agreed to visit him, expressing her willingness to support him as family. Sam's messages showed that he had planned her visit. Furthermore, Sam's car and passport were missing from the apartment, leading the police to suspect that he was trying to evade arrest. With both his passport and car missing, it seemed that Sam would soon be identified as the killer. However, the police would soon discover that the situation was more complicated than it appeared. Back in 2002, when Sam was 18, he was charged with the murder along with 17 others in the stabbing and beating death of 19-year-old Byron Benito in Canyon Country. On January 15, 2002, Sam, who had known Byron since childhood, picked him up and took him to a location behind a mobile home park where a group of suspected gang members attacked and killed Byron. Although Sam was charged with murder, he was eventually acquitted, but this did not ease the police's suspicions of him. Sam's family believes in his innocence, but the police believe they are after the right suspect. Since Sam is trained in the use of firearms, he will be armed. Fearing that they are dealing with a dangerous criminal, the police issue a warrant for Sam's arrest. Meanwhile, Costa Mesa police begin monitoring Sam's cell phone and credit card transactions to find him. They learn that he has made 4 ATM withdrawals since his disappearance. Additionally, his credit card was used at a pizza delivery restaurant in Long Beach, California, just 20 miles from Sam's home. The police hoped to find Sam on surveillance footage, but when the bank provided the ATM recording, they were shocked to see a teenager in a hoodie and baseball cap withdrawing money from Sam's bank account. Neither the police nor Sam's parents were able to identify the teenager. Police believe he may be helping Sam escape or hide. Costa Mesa police are eager to find him. On May 26, 2010, police learned that Sam's credit card had been used at another pizza delivery service and began tracking the delivery driver. After obtaining the delivery address, they rushed to the location, thinking they had finally found Sam's hideout. However, when police raided the home, they did not find Sam, but instead found 17-year-old Wesley Freelich and several of his friends. Despite being suspected, police immediately ruled Wesley out as a suspect, but he still had Sam's credit card on him. Wesley shared a surprising story that police did not expect. He revealed that he had received a credit card with instructions to withdraw cash, but that the card was not given to him by Sam, and he said Daniel Wozniak, a local stage actor Wesley met through community theater, had given him a credit card. Daniel claimed to be a bail bondsman who needed to collect money that Sam owed. While most people might have refused, Wesley saw Daniel as a brother and, not realizing the severity of the situation, agreed to help. In total, $1,900 was withdrawn from the account. Daniel Wozniak's name came to the attention of the police when they discovered an invitation to Daniel's upcoming wedding in Sam's apartment. But who is Daniel really, and what is his relationship to Sam? Did he help Sam escape, or was he involved in the murder? Many questions remain unanswered. Daniel Wozniak, born March 23, 1984, is the youngest of three brothers. Because his parents worked long hours, he spent a lot of time with his grandparents after school. Growing up in a wealthy family, Daniel and his family often went on lavish vacations. He was considered a good student at school, getting top grades most of the time. He used pranks, singing, dancing, and magic tricks to attract people's attention. He loved being the center of attention. Realizing that he had a talent for performing on stage, Daniel began acting and singing in musicals in his early 20s. He was quite open-minded about his plans for the future, but was never able to hold down a job for long, forcing him to move from job to job with very low pay. However, he kept his passion for acting and continued to participate in theater. It was in one of these musicals that he met his dream partner, an actress. After a short period of dating, they decided to marry on May 26, 2010. The police found Daniel while he was celebrating his bachelor party in Huntington Beach, California. He was related to Sam Hart because they lived in the same apartment complex. The police suspected that Daniel may have helped Sam escape or hide, or that he was involved in Julie's murder. With an arrest warrant in hand, the police interrupted Daniel's bachelor party. His expression changed when he saw the police, and they took him into custody for questioning. In the interrogation room, Wozniak initially claimed that his only crime was participating in credit card fraud and covering up for Sam. He explained to the police that he and Sam had planned to drain his bank account with Wesley's help and then claimed that he had stolen the credit cards. However, Daniel claimed that before they could carry out their plan, Sam made a shocking confession. He added that after this confession, he dropped Sam off at a local shopping mall and had not seen him since. However, the police believed that he was still covering for Sam and that he had more to do with Julie's murder than he had told them. The police changed their approach by taking a DNA sample from Daniel, which made him appear nervous. As he tried to remain calm, the police sensed that something was wrong. Almost immediately, he began adding more details to his statement. The police asked, "Can you explain what happened to Sam?" Daniel replied, "I told him I needed to move some objects in the theater. I said, 'Lift this up,' and as he bent down, I grabbed the gun. I had never fired a gun before, so I pulled the trigger and shot him." The police realized that Daniel is worried that his DNA might be found at Sam's apartment, despite his attempts to downplay the issue. Under pressure, he continually changes his story. After a brief silence, Daniel says that he knows about Julie's murder and that he helped Sam escape. When the police remind him that they have his DNA, he insists that it does not match anything on Julie's body, insisting that he had nothing to do with the murder. The police expect him to share more information, but he abruptly decides to end the interview. Knowing the seriousness of the situation, the police press him for more information, warning that he will be arrested for accessory to murder if he does not come clean and give them full details. Daniel also has a lot at stake. He has a wedding scheduled in just 48 hours and he does not want to miss it. Under pressure, he began to collapse, causing the situation to change. The police, noticing his distress, rushed into questioning by falsely claiming that they had found his DNA on Julie's body. In reality, it took weeks for the DNA test results to come back, but Daniel did not dispute this claim. Instead, he explained that his DNA was present because he had been right above her. When his fabrications were exposed, he made a startling confession. This alarmed the police because initially only one gunshot wound was found at the crime scene. It was only after an autopsy that a second gunshot wound was discovered. Daniel's confession meant that he had been present when she was killed, making him an accomplice to the murder, allowing the police to formally arrest him. Even though Daniel was in custody, the police still needed to locate Sam, and Daniel remained silent as they searched for clues about Sam. While in prison, Daniel called his fiancée, Rachel Buffett. When Rachel chose freedom over love, she told him that she would speak to the police about the case. Daniel knew that he had to talk to the police before Rachel did. Suddenly, he panicked, desperate to reach a deal with the police that he had refused to do just hours before. But what he told the police this time was beyond their imagination. The story begins on May 21, 2010, when Daniel asks Sam to help him with a task, moving some boxes in the attic of a theater at a local military base. While Sam is busy moving the boxes and his back is turned, Daniel suddenly pulls out a gun and shoots Sam in the head. At first, Sam doesn't know what happened, but when he realizes he's been shot, he begs Daniel for help. Without hesitation, Daniel loads the gun and shoots Sam a second time, killing him on the spot. After killing Sam, Daniel proceeds to send Julie messages from Sam's phone, inviting her to Sam's apartment. Without any remorse, he leaves Sam's body in the attic and spends the night laughing, singing, and dancing, as if he hadn't just taken an innocent life. That night, Daniel returns to the apartment and when Julie arrives, he shoots her twice in the head. He then staged the crime scene to make it appear as if Sam had attacked and killed Julie before fleeing. Daniel was also determined to hide Sam's body. In a desperate and gruesome act, he returned to the loft and cut off Sam's hands and head to conceal his identity. He dumped the body in a nearby park. Despite these horrific actions, Daniel returned to the theater as if nothing had happened. Police later found photos from the film's parties showing him laughing and joking with other members of the crew. The motive for these shocking murders was even more disturbing. It was all about money. Daniel had been struggling financially for a long time and was facing eviction, having been 2 months behind on his rent. He also had no way to pay for the lavish wedding and honeymoon he had planned. When Daniel discovers that Sam has $62,000 in savings from his time in the military, he makes the cold-blooded decision to kill 2 innocent people to fund his lavish wedding and vacation. When the police discover the backpack containing the evidence Rachel mentioned to Daniel, it becomes clear just how damaging its contents can be. Daniel's brother, Tim, was told to get rid of the backpack but instead threw it over the fence at their parents' house. The backpack contained a number of incriminating items, including Sam's financial information, passport, bloody clothing, and most importantly, the murder weapon. Daniel's DNA was found on these items, placing him solely responsible for the murders of Julie and Sam. The evidence was overwhelming, including DNA, spent shell casings, and the victim's financial records, everything the prosecutor could possibly need, including the murder weapon itself. On December 16, 2015, after a trial that lasted just 5 days, Daniel Wozniak was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. On January 11, 2016, after just 1 hour of deliberation, one of the shortest death penalty trials ever, the jury recommended the death penalty for Daniel Wozniak. On September 23, 2016, the judge sentenced him to death. It seemed there was no end to the deception in this case. Years later, police discovered that Daniel's ex-fiancée, Rachel Buffett, not only knew about the murder plots, but also lied to the police. Although she denied all charges, she was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of being an accessory after the fact, based on allegations that she had repeatedly lied to the police. On September 12, 2018, she was convicted of 2 of those charges, carrying a maximum possible sentence of 44 months. On November 8, 2018, she was sentenced to 32 months in prison and was released from prison in about 2019. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Menqi Ji. In 2012, Menqi Ji, a Chinese citizen, enrolled at the University of Missouri, Columbia, USA, where she earned a master's degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering. One of her professors was impressed by her expertise and offered her a job at biomaterials company. While working there, Menqi met her future husband, Joe Elledge, in September 2015, as he was pursuing his engineering studies. They both worked at the same company, where Menqi was Joe's boss. Their feelings for each other grew quickly, and just a year and 7 months after their first meeting, Joe proposed to Menqi on September 22, 2017, on a trail at Rock Bridge Memorial State Park, called the Devil's Refrigerator. They got married only 2 weeks later. Menqi's parents think they rushed into marriage due to the impending expiration of Menqi's visa. They felt that American citizens couldn't fully grasp the difficulty that immigrants face. Although Menqi is financially independent, but she still has difficulty obtaining citizenship. After nearly 5 months, Menqi received a promotion at work. Soon after, she discovered she was pregnant. Menqi and Joe decided that she should decline the promotion and leave her job to focus entirely on motherhood, even though she was the primary breadwinner for their family at that time. Their income decreased significantly, but it was sufficient for their essential needs. In October 2018, Joe and Menqi's family gave birth to their first daughter. However, after her birth, Menqi and Joe began to face difficulties. Although their marriage appeared normal to outsiders, only Menqi's parents were aware of the reality. After quitting her job, Menqi felt completely isolated. She doesn't communicate with anyone. Her small child became her only companion, along with daily phone calls from her mother. Traditionally, Menqi's parents had to travel from China to the United States before she gave birth, to help care for and support her. They lived in a separate house nearby and visited Menqi daily, but their appearance increased tension between Menqi and her husband, Joe. On October 9, 2019, a year after Menqi's daughter was born, Menqi's parents were alarmed when they didn't receive a call from her. Unable to reach her, they sent a family friend who lived close by to check on Menqi. When the friend arrived, Joe answered the door and revealed that Menqi was missing. He shared a troubling account. On the evening of October 8, he had tried to give Menqi a massage and flirt with her, but she rejected him, saying she needed sleep because she had important plans for the next day. Joe stated that he woke up the next morning to find Menqi gone. She had left behind her car keys, mobile phone, wallet, and, most importantly, did not take their daughter with her. Despite her absence, Joe did not immediately report her missing, believing she was simply out for a walk and would return. A family friend attempted to call Menqi but was unsuccessful. Eventually, under pressure, Joe reported her disappearance to the police, but rather than calling 911, he reached out to the non-emergency number 311. Minchi's parents were unaware of this and were convinced the police were actively searching for their daughter. On October 15, 2019, a week after Minchi went missing, her husband, Joe Elledge, reported her disappearance to the Columbia, Missouri Police Department. He recounted to detectives the same information he had shared with a family friend. Joe described Minchi as appearing stressed the night before she went missing. He mentioned that she went to bed after telling him she had important matters to attend to the next morning. When he asked her 3 times who she was meeting, she did not provide clear answers. He suspected she might be having an affair and secretly meeting another man. Later that day, Joe informed investigators that he had discovered notes on Minchi's computer discussing an affair. Joe said Minchi texted a man from China. The message ended with her expressing sadness that her husband was not interested in her. Joe speculated that Minchi might have left him for this man, potentially abandoning their daughter for a new life. He expressed his love for their daughter and his desire for Minchi to return home safely. From the outset, investigators were skeptical of Joe's account and considered him a suspect. Joe's family hired a lawyer, who revealed that Minchi and the man China with had intimate and emotional conversations via text messages. The main question is whether Minchi went to see the man who lives in China, and where she is now. The police found out that Joe, upon realizing his wife was missing, did not call 911, but instead contacted 311. This made them even more suspicious of him. He willingly returned to the Columbia Police Department for further questioning. Investigators grew increasingly suspicious of his account, particularly when Joe mentioned taking long drives to find new walking spots instead of searching for his missing wife. Additionally, it was noted that Joe closed the door before leaving their apartment. It seemed like Joe didn't care how Minchi got home, especially since her phone keys were left behind. Minchi didn't drive the car. Detectives had suspicions, but they found no evidence to prove Joe was involved in his wife's disappearance, no blood, weapons, witnesses, or body. Furthermore, there was no indication that Minchi ran away to meet another man in China. They also confirmed that Minchi had not booked any flights. From the start, it was clear that Minchi would never have abandoned her beloved daughter. Minchi's parents refused to accept this hypothesis and insisted that she was a loving mother. When detectives spoke with Joe, they asked for his phone number, which he willingly provided. Inside his phone, investigators discovered something alarming: over 10 hours of secretly recorded conversations with his wife, in which Joe expressed his dissatisfaction with their marriage and his desire for a divorce. He also discussed plans to send his wife back to China. However, this discovery was minor compared to the nearly 4.5 hours of recordings found on Minchi's phone. In these conversations, the true nature of Joe emerged. He threatened his wife, referred to himself as God, and demanded that her parents stay away from their home. It was chilling. The Joe family's issues started a few weeks before Minchi gave birth. Her parents traveled from China to support their daughter, following a tradition where grandparents help with the baby for 100 days. This custom bothered Joe immensely, as he had a strong dislike for Minchi's parents. What really angered Joe was that Minchi tried to fight him back, and she said that she needed her parents. She loved them very much and needed their help taking care of the newborn. When Minchi had just given birth, the relationship between her and her husband became very tense, and they argued a lot. Minchi's mother mentioned that Joe disliked it when Minchi spoke Chinese around him because he barely understood the language. Joe interpreted everything they said as hurtful and negative towards him. Eventually, when Minchi's father could no longer tolerate the situation and returned to China, Joe felt relieved and seeing it as his personal victory. Now, he only had to manage his mother-in-law and reassert his authority in the home. Minchi's mother made Chinese dumplings for Joe's birthday, but he didn't like the way she used the cutting board. This sparked a heated argument between Joe and her. Joe angrily demanded that she leave his house for good. Munchie's mother, who believed in maintaining harmony because of her Confucian values, chose not to confront Joe and did not defend herself against his harsh words. Munchie pleaded with Joe to allow her mother to stay because she needed her mother's support, but Joe only replied with insults and foul language. Joe told Munchie was incompetent solely because she was a woman. Joe attempted to manipulate and control her. He even threatened Munchie's mother, claiming he would harm her. This left Munchie's mother in shock. She didn't understand why Joe was so angry with both her and Munchie. Feeling helpless, Munchie sought help from Joe's mother, who quickly lost her temper and drove 2 hours to address the family conflict. However, even with his mother present, Joe couldn't hide his disdain for his mother-in-law. He demanded that she kneel and bow to him. Although Joe eventually apologized to her, he still insisted that she leave before the 100-day mark. Consequently, Munchie's mother returned to China. In October 2019, Munchie disappeared. Detectives believed that serious family conflicts made her feel trapped, especially regarding her immigration status. Just 5 months prior, she had to attend another interview to apply for citizenship. 2 weeks after Munchie's disappearance, the Columbia Police Department opened a criminal investigation into the case. On the same day, 16 days after she went missing, police arrested Joe Elledge on suspicion of child abuse. Joe confessed to physically abusing his 1-year-old daughter, claiming it was a form of discipline. Before Munchie went missing, she told her mother that she had seen bruises on her daughter and suspected Joe was the cause. Her mother advised her to report Joe to the police, but Munchie never had the opportunity to do so. Joe's lawyer claimed this was merely an attempt to get Joe imprisoned. He argued that Joe made a mistake, emphasizing that he is a young single father who might have erred. Joe was released on bail, while his mother assisted him and cared for her granddaughter. Meanwhile, detectives continued to gather evidence against Joe, convinced that he was involved in Munchie's disappearance. On October 25, 2019, police obtained a search warrant and entered the apartment. Joe had been missing for just over 2 weeks. During the search, they collected Munchie's backpack and notes that Joe had written to help himself prepare for questions from reporters and investigators. Detectives thoroughly searched the apartment for any evidence and, following a hunch, they also took a pair of dirty boots for examination, but they found nothing significant. On the same day, Joe Elledge was arrested on suspicion of child abuse after fresh bruises were discovered on the girl's body. Meanwhile, the search for Munchie has become a search for her remains, because no one believes she is still alive. Detectives carefully tracked all movements of Joe's car and phone. However, every lead they followed led to dead ends in this complex case. As a result, the detective made the decision to charge Joe Elledge with first-degree murder, even without a body. These charges were filed while Joe was still in jail on child abuse allegations. Meanwhile, detectives continued their efforts to locate Munchie. Phone records indicated that Joe was away for 30 minutes on the day he reported her missing, a fact he did not share with investigators. When the detectives searched that location, they found nothing. After months of searching, the police were still unable to find Munchie. Her mother traveled to the United States to help with the search, convinced that her daughter's body was nearby. Over the following months, the police conducted regular searches in the area, and Munchie's mother held a memorial by the river. A year later, while Joe was still awaiting his trial, a tourist was walking in the park where Joe had proposed to Munchie. He noticed something shiny in the mud and discovered it was a wallet. Upon closer inspection, he saw a pair of shoes and then what looked like a human skull. He immediately contacted the police. Upon investigation, it was confirmed that the remains were those of Munchie. Her parents learned that their daughter had died, but the circumstances surrounding her death were still unclear. Much time had passed, and even forensic experts could not determine the cause of death. They found unnatural damage to her bones, including 4 broken ribs, indicating she had suffered a strong blow to the back. Detectives began to piece together a theory about what happened to Munchie, focusing on the evidence collected after her disappearance. They noted that Joe's cell phone records indicated he was near the location where Munchie was found on the day he reported her missing. On the day Munchie disappeared, it had been raining. Key evidence included Joe's dirty boots. The dirt and gravel on the soles, along with foliage, were sent to the Missouri Botanical Garden for analysis. The lab carefully removed juniper tree needles from the boots for DNA testing. A lab worker then climbed nearby juniper trees, numbered each, and collected fresh needles from the highest branches. These samples were preserved and compared with the needles found on Joe's shoes, revealing a DNA match. On November 1, 2021, Joe Elledge's trial for the murder of his wife, Munchie, began. With compelling evidence that Joe was present at the scene where Munchie's body was discovered on the day she went missing, including DNA from the trees and geolocation data. However, his lawyer presented a new narrative. The lawyer claimed that Joe did kill his wife, but insisted it was a tragic accident. Due to evidence from the juniper tree and its DNA, Joe could no longer assert that Munchie had run away. He had to confess that he buried her in a shallow grave. Joe stated that he was aware of his wife's communication with a man from China, and they had an argument that night. Feeling upset and hurt, he wanted to take their daughter for a walk. Munchie rushed towards him, intending to take the child, but Joe pushed her away. She fell against the table, injured her ribs, and lost consciousness. When she regained consciousness, she went to bed. In the morning, when the child started crying, Munchie did not wake up. Joe then realized she had passed away in her sleep. He claimed that his wife had attacked him first and that he was only defending himself, asserting it was self-defense. However, this explanation seemed highly questionable. Joe was twice the size of his wife, making it unlikely that she could have attacked him, and after sustaining such a severe injury, she would not have been able to get up and walk to the bed. The prosecutor argued that the evidence, particularly the 4 broken ribs, suggested Joe's account was fabricated. This injury indicated she had suffered a brutal beating. The prosecutor alleged that it was premeditated murder driven by months of escalating anger. Joe harbored hatred for his wife. In court, the prosecutor presented secret audio recordings between the couple to reveal the true dynamics of their relationship. These recordings helped clarify the motive behind the crime. No evidence of Munchie communicating with other men was ever found. On November 11, 2021, after nearly 7 hours of discussion, the jury reached a verdict. They found Joe Elledge guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Munchie and Joe's daughter currently lives with Joe's mother, but Munchie's parents are pursuing joint custody of their 4-year-old granddaughter. Joe's lawyer argues that while the child will always have a relationship with her Chinese grandparents, she should stay in the care of Joe's mother for her safety. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lucy Letby. Today, we will discuss the case of a baby killer who was dubbed the most brutal in British forensic history. This case began in 2015. In the UK, about 700,000 babies are born each year, with around 3,000 admitted to the hospital in Chester, located in northwest England. The following year, from June 2015 to June 2016, staff in the neonatal department noticed a sharp increase in infant mortality rates. This troubling trend was occurring in the wards where premature and ill babies were treated. Doctors sensed that something was wrong, and internal investigations did not uncover any medical explanations for the deaths. The high infant mortality rate prompted police to investigate the neonatal unit, where they uncovered disturbing circumstances surrounding several deaths. After an extensive investigation, a young nurse who had worked at the hospital for many years was arrested. The investigation has revealed disturbing details about the incidents, leaving the families of the dead children devastated by the news. 5 years after the first child's death, police contacted the family and others, forcing the parents to hear heartbreaking details about what had happened to their child and testify against the suspect. In court, numerous witness statements were presented. The children were murdered using various methods. One was poisoned with insulin by a nurse, while another suffered severe liver damage. However, the most common method used was injecting air into the bloodstream, which created an air bubble that blocked blood flow. This technique was particularly insidious as it left little evidence, making it hard to prove it was lethal. The motive behind the nurse's actions remains unclear. The police determined that she gained knowledge about blood flow from the courses she took to enhance her qualifications. They warned her that injecting air into a vein could be extremely dangerous. Soon after completing these courses, a tragic incident occurred where a baby died after being injected with air through an intravenous drip. In this case, it was difficult to establish the exact cause of death. The parents of the baby described his condition as critical. They would visit the hospital every morning and leave in the evening, hoping for his recovery. However, one night his condition suddenly worsened, and the doctors believed he had no chance of survival. This led the parents to make the heartbreaking choice to disconnect their newborn from life support. The nurse killer worked another night shift the following day and attempted to harm the sister of the initial victim. Fortunately, the girl was able to escape unharmed. The third incident involved a child known in court as Baby D, where air was intentionally introduced into the child's body. This incident took place just 2 weeks after the first one, in June 2015. Notably, Baby D was a full-term infant, unlike the other victims who were all premature and receiving specialized care until they could survive without life support. Despite being full-term, Baby D had some health complications. The mother went through a long and difficult labor, after which the baby had difficulty breathing. The baby should not have been in the neonatal department, but due to a tragic coincidence, he ended up there. The baby's mother was the first to testify in court against the nurse who was suspected of murder. In her statement, she described seeing the nurse leaning over their child's crib during the day. Although it seemed like the nurse was doing nothing, her wandering around looked very suspicious. That night, the parents were awakened by a nurse who informed them that their child had suddenly become very ill. When they arrived at the ward, the doctor attempted to resuscitate Baby D, performing life-saving measures repeatedly until he realized the baby had died. This all happened right in front of the baby's mother and father. The investigation revealed that during the night shift, the suspect gave 3 lethal injections to the child. After Baby D died, doctors observed an unusual rash on the victim's stomach. Small purple spots that the medical staff could not identify. They were unsure of its significance. Later, this distinctive rash appeared on many victims of the nurse killer. Interestingly, the spots appeared briefly and then vanished completely. One of the victims, known as Baby E, was part of a set of twins, and their mother also testified in court. The twins were diagnosed with a minor illness that required treatment in a medical facility. While the mother was with her husband, she began experiencing contractions 50 kilometers away from the hospital. They rushed to the hospital, where she had a cesarean section, and the newborns were immediately taken to the neonatal department. The mother stayed in the hospital to recover from the surgery. Her husband left for work, and on August 3rd, she went to check on her twin babies to make sure everything was all right. She followed her regular hygiene routine by wiping their heads and necks and changing their diapers. A few hours later, around 9 p.m., she heard her son crying loudly and rushed to his side. When she got there, she noticed blood around his mouth. The nurse responsible for the care of the babies was nearby in the department at that time. It was later determined that the mother almost caught the nurse in the act of trying to harm her baby, which scared the nurse away. However, the mother didn't have enough time to fully comprehend the danger her child was in. The mother screamed for help, prompting another nurse to escort her to the ward to help her calm down. Meanwhile, the baby started to bleed heavily, and the bleeding could not be stopped. The doctors fought to save the baby's life for about an hour, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Similar to previous cases, the baby had a suspicious rash on his body. The attending physician noted the rash recurred around the time of death and commented that he had never seen anything like it before. Determined to uncover the mystery behind these alarming occurrences, the doctor began researching medical reference books. He discovered that the rash was linked to a blockage of the pulmonary artery. This revelation marked a significant turning point for the medical staff, as they were now closer to solving the mysterious deaths of infants in the clinic. During the trial, the doctor admitted that he only fully understood the situation months after the deaths of the children. The doctors at the clinic became increasingly concerned about the cases involving children. It was clear that something troubling was happening, but no one suspected that it could be caused by someone meant to safeguard the children's lives. One doctor, who determined that all the children had suffered from pulmonary embolism, began to investigate further. He soon noticed a troubling pattern. Every time a child died, a nurse named Lucy Letby was on duty and had been seen by the parents before the deaths. It was hard to believe. No one could imagine that someone as kind as Lucy could be responsible for such actions. Lucy Letby was born on January 4, 1990. She grew up in Harris Ford and attended Elston High School and Hartford College. A childhood friend said she was a dedicated student who had wanted to be a nurse since she was a child. Lucy pursued her passion for caring for newborns by studying nursing at the University of Chester. During her studies, she worked as a nurse for 3 years, completing an internship at Liverpool Women's Hospital. The whole family was proud of her high academic achievements and believed that she wanted to help children. In 2010, Lucy started working as a nurse in the neonatal department of the hospital where many tragic events occurred. Her family described her as someone who loved saving the lives of babies, witnessing their recovery, and supporting their families. She was actively involved in charity work and participated in fundraising for sick children. Because of her kind and gentle personality, many found it hard to believe that she could be involved in the deaths of children. However, evidence suggested that Lucy was the one who injected air into the bloodstream of her young victims. Doctors took time to investigate additional evidence to confirm their suspicions about Lucy's involvement, as there were many uncertainties. Ultimately, everyone agreed that Lucy should be reported. The head physician became aware of the neonatal department's concerns regarding Lucy. However, that evening, the management was preoccupied with their own issues and overlooked the seriousness of the situation. They even pressured doctors not to cause panic, fearing that it would draw unwanted public attention to the problem. The hospital's reputation was at stake, and management was worried about the potential consequences. At this point, the doctors had repeatedly asked the hospital management to take action against the nurse they suspected of being a killer. Unfortunately, their concerns were completely ignored, and no one took them seriously. Their fellow nurses were also confused, unsure whether to go to the police, as they found it hard to believe that one of their own could commit such terrible acts. This left the doctors in a difficult position, forcing them to step back and reevaluate all they knew. They were focused on the alarming trend of healthy or nearly healthy children, who had been born prematurely without any clear reasons, continuing to die. These babies did not respond to resuscitation efforts, and in most cases, developed a mysterious rash that vanished after death. Ultimately, they decided that the best course of action was to carry out a police investigation to find out if Lucy was responsible in these situations. As a result, the hospital staff contacted the police directly. The doctor who initially reported the concern stated that he took all necessary steps to protect the children in his care. However, he was unable to communicate with upper management, and any delay could jeopardize the lives of other infants. So he decided to call the police. Police quickly began investigating these horrific crimes. As the case stalled, rumors started circulating within the hospital. It became evident, even from a brief examination, that Lucy was connected to the deceased children, as these incidents only occurred during her shifts. She was consistently present when the children faced difficulties. This information spread rapidly among the medical staff. Regardless of whether the rumors were proven true, tensions within the team escalated. Lucy faced open accusations, and she was subjected to significant pressure, yet she maintained her innocence regarding the baby's deaths. Lucy believes they are trying to blame her for the failures of other doctors. This situation began in July 2015. Later, a group of doctors emerged who attempted to blame a nurse for the deaths of newborns. They voiced their concerns, and during the trial, Lucy accused them of conspiring to hold her responsible for the deaths in the neonatal unit. Lucy openly made these accusations because she believed they were trying to cover up serious violations connected to hospital management, which could potentially implicate many staff members and administrators in the deaths of the infants. In reality, four doctors were investigating the causes of the newborn deaths. They expressed their disbelief that a nurse, whose role was to care for and protect children, could intentionally administer lethal injections. However, as more evidence was reviewed, the connections became increasingly evident. After thoroughly examining the situation, the doctors concluded that the only possible explanation for the deaths was the introduction of air, which was noted to be associated with unexplained spots. The major challenge was that lethal injections leave almost no evidence, making it extremely difficult to prove they were the cause of death. The only potential evidence against Lucy involved 2 cases of insulin poisoning in children. However, at the time the tests were conducted, these cases had not yet been evaluated. In the past, it was extremely difficult to determine these tests. However, the seriousness of the situation required the doctors and investigators to be diligent in gathering evidence, as it could prove Lucy's guilt in an extremely disturbing crime. They were finally able to obtain blood samples taken 8 months before the trial began. The 2 boys, each from 2 different sets of twins, had been poisoned with insulin. The insulin levels in their blood were significantly higher than normal, and such a high dose could not have been given by mistake, as the medical facility had put safeguards in place to prevent accidental overdose. However, the objects showed abnormal indicators that led to their deaths, which was confirmed through examination of the evidence. These insulin-poisoned children were taken care of by Lucy. Another significant case in the investigation was the death of a child, which was likely the most brutal. This was the same baby who began bleeding heavily, and the mother saw Lucy nearby. Medical staff reported that a metal instrument had been inserted into the baby's mouth, causing severe internal injuries. During the nearly hour-long resuscitation attempt, the baby bled from both the mouth and nose, losing about 25% of his blood volume. Doctors fought to save the baby, performing CPR and injecting 5 doses of adrenaline to stimulate the heart. Although the heartbeat returned temporarily, the baby did not breathe for more than 15 minutes, giving him no chance of survival. At the time of death, before any investigation began, it was concluded that the cause was natural. Extensive bleeding can sometimes result from intestinal infections in babies. Since there was no suspicion of medical personnel being involved at that time, an autopsy was not performed. This decision is viewed as the biggest mistake made. If it had been established then that the bleeding was due to a foreign object, the investigation would have started sooner, leading to more evidence against Lucy. A similar situation arose with a girl who was one of a set of triplets. After an autopsy, forensic experts discovered she had a serious liver injury. Experienced specialists compared the injury severity to the aftermath of a major accident. However, the exact cause of the girl's ruptured liver was never determined. Lucy, the suspect, went on to kill the second triplet, who was later named in court. There were no other tragic incidents during Lucy's long holiday in Ibiza. However, 2 children died just hours after she returned to work for her first shift. A third child was also in danger, but the parents insisted on taking their child to another medical facility because they felt something was wrong and did not trust the hospital staff. On June 23, 2016, during a separate set of triplet assessments at the trial, a baby was in critical condition with a severely swollen stomach, struggling to breathe. He was placed on a ventilator while numerous staff members, including Lucy, worked frantically around him. The baby's body showed signs of swelling, and his brain was deprived of oxygen for a long time. Doctors worked tirelessly to save him for 17 hours before he passed away. They waited for the transport team to arrive to transfer the baby to the central hospital, while the remaining staff anxiously counted down the minutes until help arrived. Lucy made a shocking comment. He would not survive anyway. She said it so calmly that everyone was taken aback. She seemed to take pleasure in the unfolding drama and appeared to be waiting for the baby to die. Following these incidents, the doctors, feeling desperate, contacted the police. After the attack on the triplets, Lucy was moved to another department. In that new department, they did not encounter similar issues, despite having the same staff and responsibilities, and the mysterious deaths ceased. However, the doctors recognized the need for stricter security measures. Consequently, Lucy was suspended from work a month. During this time, the hospital continued to investigate, but there was not enough evidence against Lucy. In response to the suspension without any clear reason, Lucy filed a complaint against the hospital. As a result, the management apologized and decided to reinstate her. However, her colleagues disagreed with this decision. They argued that Lucy should only return to work after installing surveillance cameras in every room to monitor her actions. This solution worked, and after the cameras were installed, no further incidents occurred, even after Lucy resumed work. At the same time, the police were conducting an investigation. They discovered evidence showing that Lucy was trying to get the attention of a doctor from the resuscitation team, whose identity remains confidential. Love letters addressed to him were later found in her home. This doctor worked in the neonatal department, but he was married, 17 years older than Lucy, and saw her only as a friend and colleague, with no romantic interest. Before that, they attended advanced training courses in London together, had lunch, went for walks, communicated constantly, and he often drove her home. When the doctor arrived to testify, Lucy lost control. Before this point, she had been distant and unresponsive, but when she saw him, she began to cry and tried to leave until her lawyer calmed her down. This reaction was puzzling and difficult to explain. Lucy asserts that her feelings for the resuscitation doctor are purely friendship, and he supports her statement. However, psychologists and experts investigating the case noted her behavior. Lucy wrote him love letters, expressed joy when he gave her chocolate, and closely monitored his social media accounts as well as those of his wife and teenage children. Experts believe that Lucy deliberately created situations to get closer to him, especially since he was the one performing the resuscitation in all the relevant cases. However, during court proceedings, Lucy dismissed these claims as baseless speculation. In July 2018, Lucy Letby was arrested for the first time. Police conducted 2 simultaneous raids, one at her parents' home and another at her own residence. During these searches, a significant amount of evidence was collected, which aided the investigation and supported the case against her. This evidence included medical documents, notes, stickers, and photographs of children's cards found on a mobile phone. More details will be shared later. She was released on bail but was arrested again a year later. In June 2019, Lucy Letby was charged with the murder of 7 children and the attempted murder of 10 others. The trial will begin in October 2022. Is expected to last at least 6 months due to the sheer volume of material to be reviewed, including more than 100 hours of questioning in some 5,500 depositions. However, there are significant restrictions on sharing information because the case is both complex and sensitive. In particular, the identities of the deceased are being kept secret because of their age. Key pieces of evidence include postcards that Lucy created for the victims' parents, expressing her condolences and posing with them. These documents were found on Lucy's phone. A key moment in the court proceedings was when stickers discovered in the Lucy's home were presented. One sticker describes her as the embodiment of evil, while another reveals her confession to killing babies. The note stated that Lucy felt she did not deserve to live and that she had deliberately killed them because she believed she was not good enough to take care of them. She described herself as a bad and evil person. It was also written on the back of the note that she needed help and could not go on anymore. Lucy kept a diary in which she wrote about the problems she faced in life. Lucy thought that she would never have children or a loving husband and family. Lucy felt helpless in everything and was often afraid. She expressed her pain in these short notes filled with despair. She cried every day at the same time. Even though she wrote that nothing was wrong, she still felt anxious about her situation. Initially, Lucy was happy to befriend the resuscitation doctor she loved. She detailed their encounter and how he supported her. However, he turned his back on her in early 2018, just before her first arrest. This was when Lucy was suspended from work, which caused her to fall into depression, as her job was her purpose in life. The lawyer argued that these notes did not prove her guilt, especially given the myriad of issues she faced. She was suspended, hospital staff were accusing her of abuse, and her mental state was unstable. She blamed herself for what happened because she felt she did not have enough time to help her young patients. The defense argued that Lucy's notes did not admit to the murders and suggested that she was only indirectly involved. The prosecution presented a note containing the names of the triplets who were victims of Lucy's attack as evidence. The note included names, birth dates, expressions of regret, and phrases that implied she was involved in the tragedy. It was found under the bed along with the children's medical records. When police searched her apartment, Lucy claimed that these notes could have accidentally ended up at her home when she forgot to throw away all the contents of the pockets of her work coat. Lucy appeared in court visibly emotional as she took the witness stand. She expressed her devastation over being suspended from her job, which had been incredibly important to her. Lucy described her time in prison as particularly challenging, compounded by her depression. The situation escalated when police arrived at her home to conduct a search at 6 a.m. while she was with her father. Being accused of multiple child murders was a complete shock to her. She was released on bail 3 days after her arrest, but in 2019, she faced a second arrest. Lucy stated that these experiences left a lasting impact on her life, making her fearful of loud noises and heightening her sensitivity to stimuli. A prison psychologist later diagnosed her with post-traumatic stress disorder. The trial made everything worse for the Lucy. She had to travel an hour and a half to the courtroom and was only returned to her cell around 7 p.m., which was exhausting for her. She often refused to attend court hearings in front of the families of the murdered children, which the victims' parents found disrespectful. In court, the Lucy expressed that she was going through a tough time filled with discrimination and accusations. She also lost her cherished job, which affected her deeply. The pressure was overwhelming, especially with the possibility of losing her freedom and never getting married. At times, she felt completely helpless during this difficult period. She began to experience mental health challenges due to increasing pressures and difficulties. According to Lucy, she started her career at a medical institution in 2010 as a full-time qualified nurse, caring for 3 to 4 babies in her unit. To enhance her skills, she participated in special training courses and continually pursued additional education to improve her knowledge. Ultimately, Lucy earned the qualification of a mentor, which is a notable achievement for a nurse in her field. Lucy loved her job and enjoyed learning new skills to improve her abilities. In the spring of 2015, she completed a 6-month course in Liverpool, which enabled her to work with babies and children coming from intensive care. She took great pride in her work and would not trade her position for anything. From June 2015 to June 2016, Lucy continued to work in the same department. During this time, several critically ill patients were admitted to the hospital simultaneously. The complex needs of the children included serious conditions, such as blood clotting disorders. Lucy worked incredibly hard, accumulating many overtime hours. She dedicated all her free time to her job, which took a toll on her, leaving her completely exhausted by her daily responsibilities. In 2015, one of the children sadly passed away. This was a challenging moment for Lucy, but she felt supported by her colleagues, who encouraged one another as best they could. Although this incident was likely not her fault, Lucy appreciated how it brought the entire team together, and she wished to experience that sense of unity again. The situation was complicated by many controversial aspects. The prosecution thoroughly investigated and gathered information about children's deaths in the hospital over a 6-year period, starting from when the staff filed a complaint. Throughout this time, Lucy was seen as a skilled and competent nurse with a strong work ethic. She was highly regarded as a specialist, making it hard to believe she could be involved in the deaths. The investigation gathered strong evidence that pointed to her guilt in the horrific murders committed by the nurse. It is noteworthy that she acted completely openly. The jury took 22 days to deliberate before finding her guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 10 others. However, thanks to media coverage, she became known as the most brutal child killer in British history. On August 21, 2023, Lucy Letby was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the harshest penalty available under UK law. She is the 4th woman in the history of the UK to receive such a sentence. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Martin Durham. Martin Durham was born in 1969 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was an ordinary child and lived in good conditions, all around his natural beauty. In addition, he loved fishing and hiking, capturing photos along the way. He usually took a tent and a hiking backpack to enjoy a few days in the fresh air, he often accompanied by an older cousin. At 17, Martin met his first love, Glenna Johnson, who was a year older. They live in the same area and attended the same school. Their romance was brief, leading to a quick breakup, but they got back together and broke up many times. They shared many interests and could not stay apart for long. Despite their similarities, but they ultimately decided to end the relationship and go their separate ways. For a long time, they neither saw nor communicated with each other. During this period, Martin met another woman, Christine Keller, and he quickly fell in love with her. The two of them get along very well and then they soon moved in together. After a short time of dating, he realized that she would be an ideal life partner, and they should build a stronger relationship. In the following years, Christine and Martin married and moved into a house given to them by their parents, located in a quiet residential area of the city. Over the next few years, they had 2 sons and a daughter. Christine focused on managing the home and caring for the children, while Martin worked to support the family. In addition to his main job repairing cars, he also worked at a restaurant in the city of Vlam. Despite this, the early years of their marriage were challenging, especially because their children were born close in age. So, they had many difficulties in taking care of their young children. They slept little and were often exhausted, leading to frequent arguments. However, they were determined to overcome these difficulties. Martin was a devoted father and made every effort to support his family. Many people saw him as a role model. In March 1995, Martin's family faced a tragedy when a truck ran a red light and collided with his car. The truck dragged his car along the road, crushing both Martin and the driver. Martin suffered severe injuries, including broken ribs, a broken jaw, broken legs, and a traumatic brain injury that severely damaged a large part of his brain. Doctors tried their best to save him, but he was in a coma for months. Then, he underwent multiple surgeries and slowly began to recover. However, Martin's difficulties were not over. It took a long time for him to return to his normal life. He had to relearn basic movements, like sitting up and holding his head, before progressing to more complex ones. The accident left his face disfigured, and he lost some brain functions. Despite the difficulties, he tried to overcome them and return to a normal life with his family. He spent a long time moving around in a wheelchair before transitioning to crutches. Although he gradually overcame the physical effects of the accident, he remained psychologically affected. Martin could no longer work as an auto mechanic to support his family, and he encountered many physical limitations that turned his life upside down. The hardest thing for him was not being able to maintain the active lifestyle he had before. He loved camping, fishing, and traveling, but now he was bedridden and just hang around the house. Every movement caused him severe pain, which only the strongest painkillers could help manage. According to doctors, these effects would persist throughout his life. This challenging time affected not only Martin, who survived the accident, but also his family. His wife, Christine, previously managed only the children and household chores, but now she had to handle the family's finances. She was compelled to enroll the children in daycare and find a job to support them, in addition to caring for her sick husband. Fortunately, her close relatives pitched in to help. With their support, Christine was able to manage all the difficulties. However, Martin also became aggressive and hostile towards his wife. In addition, he also lost his memory. He cannot remember much about his past, including family events, and sometimes forgot his children's names. Longtime friends and acquaintances became strangers to him. He was isolated because he did not communicate well with people due to severe memory loss, difficulty concentrating, and confusion. This makes him cold and looked down upon. Martin often retreated into his own thoughts, which he kept to himself. Meanwhile, he was recovering from injuries and regularly attended physiotherapy, sometimes staying in the hospital for treatment. He switched doctors several times, but fortunately, his physical condition gradually improved. However, he was still tormented by the psychological aftermath of his trauma. At the same time, Martin constantly controls the family's spending and criticized his wife's financial management. This made their relationship more and more strained. This was a very difficult time for the young family. Martin went through a difficult process of dealing with trauma and psychological problems, but was unable to overcome them. Some issues made him angry, and he often lost his temper with his wife without justification. Christine did her best to accept the changes in her husband's behavior, but eventually, she felt she couldn't take it anymore. Years after the accident, Christine filed for divorce. Later, she admitted that she didn't want to do it, but she couldn't stand Martin any longer. The divorce was a major blow to Martin. He felt resentment and disappointment for a long time. Some time passed, he was able to regain his spirits. He received a large insurance payout for the accident, which he used to buy real estate and purchase another house. In addition, Martin was also paid a monthly sum by his insurance company as compensation for the accident during his recovery. Thanks to this, he was able to continue his life and take care of himself without financial hardship. After that, Martin moved to his new house with the parrot that Christine loved so much. She had left the bird with he to keep him company and prevent loneliness. The bird, a 15-year-old African gray parrot named Bat, was quite old. This new house is located in Sand Lake, not far from his previous house. He had big plans to recover as soon as possible, so he could return to normal life for the sake of his children. Martin quickly settled into his new place. He kept in regular contact with his children, and even his relationship with his ex-wife Christine improved. She noticed that he finally had an interest in life and enjoyed spending time in the backyard. He discovered his talent for design on his own, and this was soon recognized by others. Neighbors frequently sought his help for designing private gardens and lawn care. This job has helped him earn more income and gain confidence in dealing with life's difficulties and helping him improve his health. Doctors have observed a steady improvement in his condition and has a positive direction. Although Martin's health and mood have improved significantly, but Christine still hesitated to return to him. She is afraid that old problems may return. She kept her distance, maintained contact, and brought the children to visit. By chance, Martin reconnected with his first love, Glenna Johnson, who had also recently divorced. They rekindled old feelings and began a romantic relationship. Glenna eventually moved in with Martin. Glenna's children remained with her ex-husband, but she still visits them regularly. Martin's children also visited from time to time. Glenna and Martin enjoy activities such as fishing, hunting, and hiking. She assisted with his physical limitations during these times. However, it was challenging, so they often opted for walks in the area or visits to the casino, which they loved in their youth. These casino visits have become a monthly routine for them, where they tested their luck. They became well known in the local community, often invite friends and acquaintances over to play poker, backyard barbecues, and generally forming a harmonious partnership. It seems they have found each other again and are happy together. In the summer of 2005, Glenna and Martin decided to get married. Everything appeared fine, but their closest friends knew there were underlying issues in the seemingly perfect relationship. After the accident, Martin changed, he becoming more short-tempered and demanding. He tried to control Glenna and disliked when she did things without him or left him alone for errands. He tries to manage all their finances, which caused problems. She tried to manage family problems by himself, but he was suspicious that she was not entirely honest, spending excessively on unnecessary items. During this time, he continued to receive disability benefits, and his wife took on guardianship, but she had one weakness. Glenna was a gambler and spent a lot of money on it. She visited the casino much more often than her husband, without him knowing, and she losing a lot of money. Additionally, there were issues between Glenna and his ex-wife, Christine. Apparently, Martin frequently complained about Christine, accusing her of leaving him during a tough time after the accident, but he didn't talk about how he made Christine's life unbearable. Christine tolerated him for 2 years before leaving, but she continued to support him as much as she could. Christine kept in touch with Martin's and brought the children to visit he. However, he spoke negatively about Christine to his new wife, Glenna. Plus, Glenna also expressed that she absolutely does not like the children of Martin and Christine. This made Christine and her children feel uncomfortable, to the point where they didn't want to visit Martin when Glenna was there. They disliked hearing unpleasant things about their mother, Christine, and she supported their decision by not bringing them to their father. Martin became angry with his ex-wife and constantly quarreled with her. This led to tension with the children and Glenna. Overall, the relationships deteriorated, and everyone's behavior only worsened the situation. A clear testament to Glenna's deep love for Martin is the tattoo of his name on the back of her hand, which she got 18 years ago when they were dating. She never removed it, likely because she had strong emotions for him all these years. She has still loved him for the past 15 years and waited for the moment they would be together again. However, within the family, the relationship was far from romantic, with frequent disputes over money. Martin suspected Glenna was overspending and debt piled up. She often took money from him without his knowledge. Over time, she took complete control of the family's finances, further straining their relationship. Glenna began using the check from the insurance company that Martin received every month as an allowance. In addition, she also illegally traded in some strong drugs. At the time of the accident, Martin did not take these medications regularly, resulting in a large amount of medication being left unused. Glenna sold these medications secretly. However, his involvement in this activity remains unclear. Some believe he was complicit in the sale, help him earn extra income while he is recovering from a traffic accident and is struggling financially. But there are also those who oppose this theory, who believe that Glenna sold the remaining amount of medicine without telling him. Even though Glenna and Martin's relationship was having problems, they persisted in a toxic relationship for over 11 years. By 2015, they still acted friendly and were always seen together, but they no longer concealed their failing marriage. Occasionally, the discontent between them led to increasingly frequent scandals. One of Glenna's friends later claimed to have witnessed their breakup, during which Glenna threatened to kill Martin. Despite this, they mostly maintained the appearance of an ideal couple, walking hand in hand as they did at the start of their relationship in their youth. By May 2015, the issue of divorce had become serious. One morning that May, Christine, Martin's ex-wife, discovered that Martin was selling his house. She found an advertisement on an auction site and was very surprised. She immediately called Martin to ask why he suddenly wanted to sell a house he loved so much, where he devoted his love to creating his garden. However, he was unaware of this sale, so he asked his current wife, Glenna, about it. Glenna claimed it was a mistake and said she would resolve it, but the fact is she didn't solve it. Previously, their car had been repossessed due to debts, and Glenna had similarly assured Martin it was a mistake and she would fix it, but nothing changed. The auction for the house was scheduled for 3 weeks later, by the end of the month. Perhaps due to the debt accumulated during their marriage, and Glenna wanted to sell the house to pay off the debt, but she did not want to tell Martin about this. On May 13, 2015, one of Martin's neighbors visited him early in the morning to discuss some routine matters. The neighbor was surprised when no one responded to his knock, as Martin usually kept his door open at that time. Concerned, the neighbor entered the house and called out to Martin and Glenna, but no one replied. Venturing further inside, he discovered the reason for the silence. In their bedroom, he found Martin lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and next to it is Glenna, who was bleeding heavily from the head. Terrified that the perpetrator might still be around, the neighbor fled from the scene and immediately called 911. When the ambulance arrived, they realized that Martin was lifeless. Martin was lying on his side, wearing only his underwear, his body already cold, and the doctors confirmed that the 46-year-old had died several hours earlier. However, Glenna was still alive and even conscious. She tried to say something. She managed to utter a fragmented sentence that was not understood. Glenna was found lying next to Martin, fully clothed. However, she could not provide any useful information about the incident. She was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment. A bullet had grazed her skull without damaging the brain, so her injuries were not severe. She recovered quickly after surgery at the clinic. Detectives were able to question her soon after, but she was still undergoing treatment, and they had other cases to handle. The investigators tried to piece together the sequence of incident by examining the crime scene thoroughly. It did not appear to be a robbery, because valuables or personal items in the house are not lost. Even the money, left in a visible spot, was untouched. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Glenna and Martin might have known the attacker and let him in. During this time, police discovered that Martin was taking strong painkillers and Glenna involved in selling them. There was then an assumption that it was that trade that may have triggered the attack. The entire scheme of selling medicines was uncovered, and detectives believe there may have been a conflict with the buyer during the transfer process. However, by that time, forensic experts had already examined and analyzed the crime scene, including the bullets and weapons found in the house. The pistol was later tested and confirmed to be the murder weapon. In fact, this pistol has belonged to Martin for many years, but both of them were shot with it. First, the attacker must enter the house, know exactly where the weapon is and retrieve it. Then he finds the magazine, loads the gun and then starts shooting. This plan seemed too complicated and therefore unlikely. Moreover, during a more thorough search of the bathroom, Martin's painkillers was found and had not been stolen, which ruled out the possibility of selling them and ruled out the motive for the crime being an attack by the buyer. The weapon used to kill Martin was found under the sofa in the living room. There is a lot of blood there, which did not match the location where the body was found. Apparently an attack also took place in the living room, a shooting, and then the shooting continued in the bedroom. Martin might have been shot in the living room, and then the body moved, but why was this done? It seemed this was done intentionally, perhaps to stage the crime and mislead the investigation. This assumption was confirmed when a spent cartridge case was found in the living room, indicating that the shooting occurred there. As the investigation progressed, more questions surfaced. Blood samples from different rooms were analyzed, revealing unexpected results. The analysis showed that all shots fired at Martin happened in the bedroom. His blood was not present in the living room, and there were no signs of his body being moved. The blood found in the living room belonged solely to Glenna, who was discovered in the bedroom. The bullet casing found in the living room corresponded to the shot that hit her head, supporting this theory. But how did she manage to reach the bedroom after this injury? Medical experts informed the police that this scenario was possible because Glenna's injury was less severe than initially thought. She could have reached the bedroom by herself, especially since she was conscious when found. Nonetheless, the situation appeared unusual. From then on, the police began to suspect that Glenna fired at her husband and then injured herself to divert suspicion. However, these theories still needed solid evidence. At this time, the police were unable to interview Glenna, as she was still in the hospital undergoing treatment and recovery. They took her mobile phone for investigation. Through this, detectives discovered that their family was experiencing a severe financial crisis. Just the day before Martin's death, she searched online for how to use the Uger 6 pistol, the same gun involved in Martin's death and her own head wound. Police found 2 farewell letters, in which Glenna apologized to her children for what she was about to do. She also said goodbye to everyone, indicating her plan to end her life. The Supreme Court identified Glenna as the perpetrator of the crime. Based on all the collected evidence, the investigation was reopened, but something compelled her to shoot her husband first. Martin was killed in the bedroom, and Glenna shot herself in the head in the living room. However, unlike Martin, she did not die instantly and managed to reach the marital bedroom. This can be clarified by talking to her, so the police waited until they could interview her. They continued gathering evidence in the meantime. Martin's family was already convinced that they were not attacked by a stranger, the shooter was his wife, Glenna. Christine Keller, the ex-wife of Martin, was shocked by the events. Although she never thought highly of Glenna, especially because of Glenna's aggressive behavior, but she did not expect this to happen. Then, Christine took her old parrot home to the children. Meanwhile, detectives were finally able to speak with Glenna, who was feeling well. Doctors confirmed that she understood what was happening around her and ready to talk to the detectives. Despite the doctor's positive assessment, But she told the investigators that, in her view, she never wrote farewell letters and did not plan to end her life, let alone kill her husband. Police officers were concerned because Glenna completely denied being involved in the attack on her husband, yet she also claimed she couldn't remember what happened on that tragic day. This inconsistency seemed suspicious and hinted that she might be a suspect, but at that time, they had no solid evidence against her. Glenna was released from the hospital several months later. Meanwhile, the investigation had not uncovered any new evidence. Police were concerned that Glenna's denials and the trauma she had suffered might convince a jury that she was innocent. One day, Christine was awakened by the parrot's voice and went to see it. She was amazed by what it was saying. She decided to use her phone to record the monologue. The parrot kept repeating, "It says, beg Glenna, don't shoot him." This caused Christine's great shock and fear. For a while afterwards, she was even haunted by nightmares. She immediately informed the police and later showed them the video recording. Although the use of a parrot as a witness in court was unprecedented, from that moment on, all of the detectives' suspicions about Glenna's involvement in the case were confirmed. New details of the case have attracted widespread public and media attention. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. The incident was again in the news at the end of June 2016 when police arrested Glenna. They had been collecting evidence to piece together a full case that would clearly show the jury who the killer was and help the Martin family get justice. It was initially thought that the footage of the parrot accusing Glenna would not be used, as it might seem too provocative, and it was uncertain how the jury would react to it. The prosecutor argued that Glenna was in severe financial trouble and could not admit her gambling failures to her spouse. For a long time before the murder, she neglected to pay bills because all her money went to cover debts from her gambling addiction. Eventually, she decided to end her life, writing 2 letters, one to her husband and one to the children. This suggested that Glenna did not initially plan to harm her husband, but something went awry. The final straw was the failed sale of the family home, which was put up for auction without her husband's knowledge. When Martin found out about this from Christine, he likely confronted Glenna. A fierce argument may have ensued, leading her to kill him in a fit of rage before deciding to end her life. Glenna and her lawyer claimed that she had no memory of the shooting or the letter and insisted that she loved her husband too much, so she can't hurt him. They presented a list of medications she was taking to improve cognitive function as evidence of her mental condition. She also denied searching online for how to use a gun, stating that she only used her phone for games and calls. The trial lasted 10 days. The prosecution believed it had a strong case to persuade the jury. However, the jury seemed uncertain, due to the largely circumstantial evidence. Then, a video of the parrot's words was introduced as a crucial piece of evidence. Experts say the parrots form a close relationship with their owner, Martin, and they learn to imitate Martin's voice. Most experts agree that those words left a strong and deep impression on the parrot's memory, so it repeated them over and over again. In the end, this evidence was effective. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found 49 years old, Glenna guilty. In this case, the parrot played an important role as a witness, contributing to finding justice.